Hey everybody, this is Mike from Bonsai Pop here with Bonsai Pop. I just wanted to introduce this video to you guys. So we are hard at work currently making a big Yu-Gi-Oh video and a big Saint Seiya video. So we thought it was a perfect time to put together a bunch of our older content that you guys likely haven't seen, and some that are like some classic hits that people really enjoyed, and just have this long form content, whether you wanted to, sleep to it or, put it on when you're driving or something like that. All of these videos are a lot of fun, and we thought shonen anime was the perfect first attempt at this. So no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, hope you're having a great day, and enjoy the video.
A little while back, I did an episode on Sailor Moon and how it changed my life, anime, and the world at large. In that video, I said that I wanted to go back to Toonami every once in a while to talk about shows that really brought anime to the West in a big way. Welcome to it. Naturally, my first choice is Dragon Ball. However, when I sat down to write the script, I came to the realization that I didn't know what I could possibly say about Dragon Ball that hadn't been said before. There are channels that are years and years older than ours, and blogs that are years and years older than that have covered every aspect of Dragon Ball affluently and eloquently, and there's not much left to say. I love Dragon Ball, but so does everybody else, so what's an analyst to do in this situation? I don't want to just tread a beaten path, it's just not my style. So after a lot of time and a lot of research, I invite you to get a new perspective on Dragon Ball, its impact on culture and what it means to people, all people, its effect on not only anime but music, culture, television, and society, in a way that many of you have never thought about before, or it could be a way that you've always thought about it, but just nobody brought it to light. To expand their understanding of how a simple show or concept can reach people when they need it the most. It can bring liberation to people who have a much harder life than they deserve. So I present to you the People's Dragon Ball.
Hey everybody, let's talk about making some positive changes in your life. Between you and me, I have spent years dealing with a vaping addiction. Not exactly something I'm super proud of, but hey, it's part of my history. And that's why I'm genuinely excited about partnering with Fume yet again to help other people make some positive changes. Fume has made something brilliantly simple, and what it is flavored air. It is an award-winning solution for people looking for a way to break their bad habits. Getting over nicotine is easy. Getting over the reward and the oral fixation of nicotine products is the hard part. With this, you get all of the satisfaction of your favorite flavors without any of the harmful side effects. You got no nicotine, no vapor, and you're not forming another addiction. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I really like the mint flavor. I also like the more fruity ones, but they got some new flavors coming out, and they are pretty good. The cinnamon hearts is definitely something special, and if you like mint like I do, the new spearmint, very refreshing. But no matter what your preference is, they got something you're gonna like, and your body's gonna thank you for it. So if you are ready to make a change, and that's the most important thing, you gotta be ready. Go over to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use my code BonsaiPop, all in caps, to get a free Fume topper when you order a journey pack. If you're lucky, you could even win one of Fume's limited edition gold-plated devices this holiday season. Or if you're not watching this on your phone, scan the QR code I got right here for you on the screen. So let's get back to the video, and don't forget, sometimes the smartest and best solutions are simple ones.
Let me take you back to a time not long before I came flying into this world full of piss and vinegar. Back to a simpler time before widespread internet access, cell phones, smart TVs, and Kim Kardashian. Before the Super Saiyan.
This is a Super Saiyan.
It was 1983 and people loved Kung Fu. In the 70s, Kung Fu had become the new cool thing in America. We even made culturally insensitive disco songs about it.
Everybody was Kung Fu fighting.
And what's cool in America bleeds into the rest of the world because we are cultural conquistadors. Like, actual conquistadors. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and I guess to a certain extent Chuck Norris had become legends in the world of Kung Fu, and by the 80s, martial arts films had experienced widespread success. The stars had become household names, especially
in black communities. In the 80s, the low-income inner-city areas of places like New York held a huge diversity of immigrants and minorities, and they still do. But because martial arts flicks were made overseas, they were inexpensive and accessible to families on a budget. Bruce Lee in particular struck a chord with people of color in America, especially in the Bronx. Fist of Fury, Enter the Dragon, and Way of the Dragon showed a man of color boldly throwing off the shackles of oppression, proudly, strongly defying the stereotypes cast particularly on Asian Americans with his strength, charisma, and booty-kicking powers. Despite Lee obviously being Asian, his skillfulness and pride was empowering to young black children feeling the weight of a country that had not fulfilled all of its promises. The influence Kung Fu had on these kids would show itself in the Bronx in the early 80s inside the burgeoning hip-hop community, in the form of breakdancing. Yes, breakdancing was invented by black kung fu enthusiasts. Many moves and the concept of dance battles is an adoption of martial arts. Around the same time, on the opposite side of the world, a man named Akira Toriyama was working on a new manga which borrowed from an ancient Chinese story and modern kung fu movies. He would name this manga Dragon Ball. While finding initial success, it wasn't until the Tenkaichi Budokai tournament arc, aka the World Martial Arts Tournament, that the manga became a smash hit. And as a manga, Dragon Ball is a single story, including Z. It's the story of Son Goku becoming the world's strongest, and then his ongoing journey from there to the stars and back. It's one of the most influential and loved franchises of all time, but it took a long time for it to make it to the States. Now, by the early 90s, hip-hop and rap had hit the mainstream, and I had hit the mortal coil. MTV was as big as it ever was, and for some reason the coolest thing in the world was ninjas. Everything was ninjas, man. Ninja Turtles, ninjas in Mortal Kombat, the Three Ninjas, Surf Ninjas. I don't know, it was all ninjas and Sentai and violence and fighting. That was the world I came into, and I loved it. I loved the idea of Kung Fu being strong and having some kind of mildly supernatural reflexes and strength. It was like the Force, but people actually had it. I loved Kung Fu movies, and I just couldn't get enough of it. Now, what I didn't realize is that something was being taught to me with these films. Well, at least the good ones.
Dynamite here! We'll throw it at him!
Struggle and triumph, a similar thing that spoke to American minorities when inexpensive Hong Kong martial arts flicks started making their way overseas. I don't know what it's like to be black or Asian, but I do know what it's like to be poor and white, and even homeless. To feel different from the other white kids. Feeling different is a universally understood emotion. Everybody feels different from other people at some time in their life. It's the systemic differentiation which isn't universal. Kung Fu films always show someone achieving their goals with their own two hands, and again, while I'll never know what it's like to not be me, the feeling of liberation through victory is something we can all universally empathize with, no matter who is being liberated. Freedom is a joyous thing, and ironically, Toriyama must have felt a similar discomfort as I do in this situation because he too was a fan of Kung Fu films, despite most of them being about the Chinese kicking the shit out of the Japanese. Toriyama's people were the oppressors of the Chinese in the 20th century. Relations over there have been strained off and on since World War II. It's a long story, but either way, he created a Japanese manga based off the Chinese countryside, a Chinese cultural novel, and Chinese martial arts films. And it became one of the most important pieces of media to hit pop culture in the past 40 years. Dragon Ball. Now, if you watched Dragon Ball Z first, don't feel bad, I did too. In America, we didn't have an option. Z was released in first run syndication, which is a televised minimal test run, in 1996, but was canceled in 98. Reruns were then posted to Toonami shortly after, and the world caught DBZ fever. The original Dragon Ball anime wasn't aired until 2001 after Z's success, minus a short first run syndication in 1995 that went horribly. This was all a perfect storm. Z was a cross-cultural phenomenon, a show that hit right when it needed to and appealed to everyone across all walks of life, and since then it's etched its way into the fabric of American pop culture. It was a show of struggle and triumph, of a simple boy with a simple goal and the roadblocks along the way. It meant a lot to me watching the characters grow and evolve and fight for justice, but it meant a lot more to others than I knew at the time. The story here is one of profundity and, just as importantly, humor. I like to call it the Lucas effect, even though I hate calling it that because Lucas is an asshole, but
I don't like sand. I know how to make movies. I went to film school.
You understand. Like George Lucas in Star Wars, Toriyama used myth and legend as a basis for his story and characters. Dragon Ball is an odyssey, and within it, deep connections can be made to all people of all walks of life. And as most of you know by now, I'm a big music guy. I was always into punk. It was a style with a message that spoke to me deeply. Question everything and fight the power. But there's also another genre which carries the same message delivered in a different way, and that's hip-hop. While punk was a reaction to the chains of white conservatism, hip-hop was a reaction to black oppression. To me, they're two sides of the same coin, a way to express yourself, your feelings, your rage, or your discontent, the political injustice of the world, or your passions. And for members of both philosophies, kung fu and anime are often interwoven. I've said it before and I'll say it again, anime is punk rock cartoons. But don't just take my word for it. Around the same year I was born, a group of New York rap artists joined together to form the hardcore hip-hop band, the Wu-Tang Clan, which I hear ain't nothing to fuck with. A man simply named the RZA became their de facto leader. The group, comprised of names you have definitely heard, Method Man, Old Dirty Bastard, Ghostface Killah, were heavily inspired by these Hong Kong martial arts films I spoke of, same as Toriyama. Their lyrics include many references to East Asian culture, particularly Kung Fu, but also things like Voltron and superheroes. They and their music, like Toriyama and Dragon Ball, are arguably the most influential and celebrated parts of their individual scenes, yet they've also merged or unified in a way. Dragon Ball is a story based on a story which is steeped in Buddhism, a philosophy of the heart and mind. In this world, to listen to the heart and mind and to be still is a protest to society which demands the opposite. Punk and hip-hop are also a protest to society, as well as so much anime. The path of Goku from child to strongest in the galaxy is one of enlightenment, the end goal of Buddhist practice. For Goku to find his purpose, to discover himself and become like God, in this case, God being the piece of the universe that is inside us all.
I think the RZA said it best in his book, The Tao of Wu, and thankfully we have our friend Nino here to read his words for you guys.
Take even a cartoon like Dragon Ball Z. I mean, it's a cartoon, but it's one of the deepest cartoons in history. Its hero, Son Goku, starts out as a kid and begins martial arts training like Sante. But it's also based on a 16th century Chinese folk novel about a Buddhist monk who travels to India to find the Buddhist sutras. That voyage represents a journey in enlightenment. But to me, Dragon Ball Z also represents the journey of the black man in America. You see it more clearly as the story goes. You learn that Son Goku is part of an ancient race called the Saiyans, who come from a distant planet and were known as the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. So Son Goku has superpowers, but he doesn't realize it. A head injury destroys his memory, robbed his knowledge of self. Then one day, he gets stressed beyond his limits and hulks out into his alter ego, Super Saiyan. He's a nigga with dreadlocks, get it? This kind of story comes up in world literature, even in the Bible. Abraham is told his seed will be lost for 400 years in a land not their own, not knowing who they are or where they're from. That's the story of the Jewish people, but it's also the story of the black man in America. So I say we are the Saiyans. I even use the name Goku as a tag when I write, and when my hair is in an afro, word up, I'm Super Saiyan. Over the years, I came to believe the basic lesson of mathematics is the same as that of Taoism, Buddhism, and every great spiritual path. It's that we all have the potential to become like God. Even Son Goku eventually learns how to develop chi on his own, to become Super Saiyan at will. And today, I believe we've all got a Saiyan inside us, because God is in each of us. That's what we're all trying to reach, through all the chambers of our lives.
Now, what the RZA is explaining here is the universal nature of the story of Dragon Ball, the universal nature of humans, the art of Kung Fu, and some of that Buddhist philosophy. Again, the RZA speaking of God isn't to be taken literally. It's more like there's a spark in each of us that remains unfathomable. In a short lesson, try to describe yourself without mentioning the way you look, what you like, or what you do. That thing that you're now struggling to describe is the real you, or in the RZA's words, a Super Saiyan. Word up. I think that it's simple why Dragon Ball means so much to me and everyone it comes into contact with. It's a journey and a struggle with adversity, one with friends and enemies, and then old enemies becoming friends, with hope and magic and humor. It's something we can all relate to because that's what life is. What Goku goes through from childhood until the end of whichever series you take as canon is a path of enlightenment. It's not just people either, it's countries and continents and our entire species which travels endlessly towards an enlightenment and struggles along the way. A path is a path. It's the way to get somewhere, whether it be rocky or paved. And for many of us in the West, Dragon Ball was what enlightened us to another culture on the other side of the globe. And because of people like the RZA and the Wu-Tang Clan, Dragon Ball helped bring hip-hop back to Japan. Ironically, hip-hop is now one of the biggest music industries on the island, and it started with breakdancing in the 80s being seen by Japanese people and taken back to Japan. Again, a style of dance created by African Americans inspired by Shaolin Kung Fu from China. It's incredible how interwoven we all are across the globe when you pull out long enough to look. The RZA himself did the soundtrack for Afro Samurai, and here's a cool one for you. The Wu-Tang Clan refer to their members as the Killer Bees, and that should be ringing a bell for you. There may be a black rapping man in another shonen anime named Killer Bee, and that might not be a coincidence, you fool. I'm just saying. Regardless of affiliation, I believe the true magic of Dragon Ball is that it speaks to the universal desire in every human to be good, to stamp out oppression and protect our planet. Is it flawed? Yes, but so are we, so how can we complain? It's what makes us human, and Dragon Ball is humanizing. Goku found his Buddha nature. It's why he remains so innocent. He sees the world as a child does, and from the eyes of a child, the world is beautiful and everyone is innocent and free. Perhaps one day we can all become children again, instead of simply acting like it, and live in some goddamn peace.
I know. That was some heavy stuff, but thank you so much for making it to the end. But before I go, let's make sure that I kiss the booty of our ultimate lucky patron of the week, Frego Maego. Thank you so much for your continued support. You have been here since the beginning, and we super appreciate you. We love you. We see you in the streams all the time. You are not only a patron, but you are a friend, so congratulations on your win this week. I would also very much like to thank our guest 9-0 for his awesome reading of the words of the RZA. We're very happy to have him, and I definitely recommend going out and checking his YouTube channel out. It's awesome. I found him a little while ago and immediately fell in love with his content. So we're going to be linking him below, and he should be in the end card. Definitely check out 9-0. Thank you, dude, so much. I super appreciate it. And last but not least, before I go, I want to introduce you to theblackgoku.com. It doesn't exist anymore, but the owner of the DAOofDragonBall.com dug up all the files that were archived and has them on display on their website, specifically to showcase a point in history in the early 2000s that went kind of unnoticed on a large scale. Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z had a profound effect on the Black community, unlike any other anime that I am currently aware of. Unlike Spider-Man, who wears an entire bodysuit and could be anyone, the simplicity of Goku being a Super Saiyan and not a human was enough for people to be able to see themselves inside of him. And when I say people, I mean anyone. Age, gender, color of your skin, doesn't matter. Goku was an all-encompassing idea. So I definitely encourage you to check out the page that I linked below. It's a fascinating showcase of the influence that Toriyama's creation had on the Black youth in America. Not all the pictures are great, but it's more about the meaning behind them, and it was really fascinating looking through them. It's a story that deserves to be told, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching. Remember that you are not alone out there, and that we are all trying to find our own way to enlightenment. But in the meantime, at least we can all enjoy some Dragon Ball. I'm Mike, this has been Bonsai Pop. One last shout out to our buddy 9-0, and I will see you next Saturday. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
Damn, the RZA is one deep motherfucker. Hey, I'm 9-0. I like big butts, and I cannot lie. And these samurais can't deny when a geisha walks in with a nice kimono on and she reveals a little bit of a thong, you get sprung. I'm sorry. All right, sayonara. Thanks for watching.
Ever wondered what it would be like if all of your favorite 80s hair metal singers got together, turned Japanese, and started fighting for the fate of the world in beautiful pastel spandex? What do you mean no? Why are you here? My dude neutrals, I am talking about Saint Seiya, the original Saint Seiya, the 1986 fantastic time machine of an anime. Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac. It's at least probable that you've heard of this manga adaptation. Saint Seiya is a true classic and beloved franchise in Japan. However, it never got the same treatment here in the West, especially not in America. Probably because it was too damn cool and absurd. You got 4 beautiful boys using their inner energy left over from the Big Bang to defend the world against evil reincarnated Greek gods alongside the benevolent lady of law and justice, Athena. Yeah, that's some anime plot right there. But what it doesn't reveal is the incredible breakneck, no nonsense, no filler, knockdown, drag out brawl that is the original run of this anime. A shonen which alongside Dragon Ball and Fist of the North Star helped form the foundation of our understanding of that genre. I shouldn't look, but I am. In the seminal year of 1986, the year anime would change forever. This is Saint Seiya. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Shonen, an event celebrating your favorites and our favorites in the most popular genre of anime, shonen. We have a lineup of greats coming your way, including Hunter x Hunter, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Yu Yu Hakusho, and many more, so hit that bell. Hit it. We'll do it together. A 1, a 2. You know how to start off a shonen right? Skip the nonsense and go right into a tournament arc. I caught Saint Seiya for the first time in 2003 on Cartoon Network and hated it. And so did everyone else, which is why it got canceled after 32 episodes. Now the reason for this is Deke Productions. And that'll happen a lot, mon frere, as Deke tended to take things that were great like lesbian love between 2 Sailor Scouts and turn it into a friendly companionship between cousins. Ah, censorship. Don't you just f***ing love that shit? Saint Seiya got the same treatment.
Couldn't get away.
You stupid trick, that'll scare me.
I think I made my point.
It wasn't until I picked up Jump Force for the PS4 that I was reminded of this show and went back to watch it in its Japanese uncut glory. And oh my god, is it uncut and glorious. I literally had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I could not have been happier. First, let's get into the look. At this point, Saint Seiya is 33 years old and it shows, but that's not a bad thing. It's choppy. Even the still frames wiggle a bit, but its character and story are so gripping, its color palette is so bombastic, its musical score is so classic. It all just blends itself into a quintessential anime experience you need every once in a while to cleanse yourself of that pixel-perfect digital wonder we're oversaturated with now. Seiya is a teenage boy who was orphaned as a child and then taken from his orphanage and sister at a young age by a rich old dude named Mitsumasa Kido. This old guy groomed Seiya to be a warrior. He and a group of other young boys like him trained in Kido's mansion until they were old enough to be shipped out to various locales around the world to be fully honed into saints. Saints are essentially the Greek pantheon's version of Power Rangers, but just like real life, not everybody gets to be a Power Ranger. The beauty of this backstory is that it's given to you piecemeal, as the show opens up with Seiya's last fight before acquiring the legendary Pegasus cloth, aka his Power Ranger suit. He had been shipped to the Sanctuary of Saints in Athens, and now that he achieved his goal, it's back to Japan and right into a fighting tournament. A fighting tournament against the other boys he trained with back in Kido's mansion. But Kido is dead now, and things are being controlled by his granddaughter, Saori Kido. A young lady most of these boys aren't particularly fond of, especially not Seiya, who was promised to be reunited with his sister after obtaining his cloth. But with Mitsumasa dead, Saori has no idea where Seiya's sister is. However, and this is genius, she promises him that if he wins her martial arts tournament, the Galaxian Wars, she'll use all of her unlimited resources to find his sister once and for all. Clear motive, clear plot, instant action. The Galaxian Wars allows the show to introduce you to its main characters and exactly what to expect from its fights. Pure
brutality. And sexy boys being sexy doing the thing. This honestly came as a shock. Like I said, I had watched some of this before, but the amount of content that Deke removed from the show left me unprepared for the copious amount of violence I was about to witness. While relatively tasteful in comparison to Fist of the North Star or Berserk, I was shocked on more than one occasion. Shonen content is directed specifically towards young men aged 12 to 18, so that's more or less what I was expecting from the show. I find Dragon Ball is the perfect example of pure shonen. It's a little crude, a little violent, but mostly innocent fun. In Saint Seiya, people just straight up die a lot, often after being brutally beaten. After the Galaxian Wars, there's a ton of characters that never show up again, and it took me a minute to realize it was because they friggin' died. When Seiya fought the Bear Saint, he killed him. Same with Cygnus and the Hydra Saint. Also, can we take a look at Cygnus real quick? He's basically Gunnar Nelson with a friggin' duck on his head. It's amazing. I love this show. Seiya even kills the Dragon Saint Shiryu in their match, only to revive him by re-punching him in the heart to get it started again. By the end of the Galaxian tournament, we're left with 4 saints. Pegasus Seiya and his Meteor Punch, Cygnus Hyoga who does ice stuff, Dragon Shiryu with his Dragon Fist, and Andromeda Shun with his beautiful Nebula Chain. I also want to highlight quickly that Saint Seiya is directly credited for the creation of yaoi, or boys love, which unlike a lot of gay media is generally created for women by women. And the main reason Saint Seiya made this come about is because of our beautiful boy Shun. The flowing green hair, the pastel green spandex, and pink armor coupled with his effeminate, gentle personality riled up a lot of fans into shipping these boys together. And let's be real, Saint Seiya is queer as hell, and that's part of its appeal. To me, anime has always been punk rock cartoons, and being glamorously queer and shining as bright as boys weighing in space is punk as fuck. Now look, I don't want to spoil too much, but in a time before the Super Saiyan, Saint Seiya was doing it right. There is no filler. It's constant action. The plot begins to twist and turn all over the place after the Galaxian Wars tournament. There's mysticism, kung fu, and these boys just love each other so much. There's even a point where Dragon Shiryu rips his own eyes out in order to save his friends. It gets way more real than you would expect, and I don't want to give away too much about the Golden Sagittarius cloth, the prize for the Galaxian Wars that ends up igniting basically a full-on race war, but it was 100% the Super Saiyan before the Super Saiyan. There's a lot to unpack with this show, and I don't want to unpack it all with our first time covering it, but what I do want to say is that if you're going to take my advice and get into Saint Seiya, cause it's the bomb, I recommend starting with the original, which is only streaming on Netflix right now. And unfortunately, it's only streaming the first 41 out of 114 episodes. But it is in beautiful 1080p and it looks crisp and perfect. Also, side note, the dub is horrible, so avoid that. You can, however, make a Japanese Netflix account and watch the entire series in all its glory, but that's a pain. It's gonna cost you another subscription. Also, Netflix, give us money. I'm tired of pimping you for free. You're not that great. Now, I'm not saying to find other ways to watch the entire series, but I mean, you can. I won't stop you, at least not until Netflix pays up. Anyway, later series of the show, not the Hades OVAs, which I hear are very good, can be found on Crunchyroll and are, in my opinion, a significant drop in quality and animation, which is impressive considering the original had some moments in it that are laughably bad, but, you know, in a good way. And lastly, the Netflix Saint Seiya remake is a blasphemous atrocity CGI Americanized homunculus that should be killed with fire. Gets a big yikes out of 10. The CG animation is actually pretty impressive and the music is really good, but they fudged it all up. They took my beautiful Shunchan and made him a girl. Now, I am all for more women in shonen, more women protagonists who fight not only with the boys, but better than the boys, but not at the cost of queer erasure. Come on. The queer glam-a-lam, it was the best part. Don't take my boys from me. But this brings me to possibly the most interesting aspect of our topic. 1986 was the year we were gifted with 3 greats, Dragon Ball, Fist of the North Star, and Saint Seiya. 2 of which are full of gratuitous violence, but all 3 are aimed at young men. While I would say anime is still violent, especially compared to American cartoons, the general level of graphic visuals has died down significantly since the 80s when we got movies like Wicked City and Akira. This should lead to the simple question, why? Obviously, American entertainment has always been on the high end of censorship thanks to our cultural romance with Abrahamic religion. We've had issues with all sorts of media being too much for our youth, but Japan might as well be another planet when we're talking about cultural norms. Shin-chan, for example, is one of, if not the most popular children's shows in Japan, and half the time he's looking up skirties. So why the shift from the gratuitous violence of the late 80s? Well, I think I found the answer. Otaku panic. In 88 and 89, the last 2 years Saint Seiya ran on network television, Tokyo was gripped with fear due to a man named Tsutomu Miyazaki, a very disturbed individuals whose crimes are so heinous I actually cannot speak about them on this platform. However, I did send his case to the Morbid True Crime podcast, so hopefully they'll cover him for me. You should check them out. After he was caught in 1989, the police raided his house and found an incredible abundance of manga and anime. He was also known to enjoy making his own comics and drawing in his spare time and was an avid horror fan. At the time, otaku were already misunderstood. The word itself means someone who is so obsessed with pop culture that it's a detriment to their social skills. The latter half of that definition being one of the most important aspects of your place in Japanese society. Miyazaki was labeled the otaku murderer, and his actions were blamed on his quote-unquote retreating into a world of fantasy and manga. If you choose to look him up, be warned his actions were extremely disturbing. He's the reason your mom always knew that those foreign cartoons were rotting your brain. Why can't you just watch Oprah or The Voice? The answer is because violence is real, unfortunately. The otaku murderer was a bad man. But World War I and II were also bad, and the Civil War, or literally any large-scale all-out conflict that has been a rotting cancer on human history. Violence has been a part of us since we were chimps and we found out we could throw our poo at another chimp. This is what I mean when I say that violence is real. So when a show like Saint Seiya doesn't hold back from the gore, is it glorifying it, or is it merely a flamboyant expression of something that is part of being human? So here is the question that I ask you, as anime fans and most likely pop culture fans as a whole: how much is too much? I grew up watching things I shouldn't have according to the rules that were set for me. Did it mess me up? I don't know. So where's the line? Is it even possible for media to warp somebody, or does someone have to be warped beforehand? Are violent cartoons a cause, or are they a convenient excuse? You tell me. Saint Seiya is a violent show, but that's not all it is. I deliberately didn't mention that it focuses heavily on the relationships between young men, compassion, sacrifice, hope for the future, and doing what needs to be done. There's a lot of ways to spin something. By looking at our back catalog, you may think we're all about brutality, but we believe very deeply in being gentle. We just love absurdity. So here's the whole picture. There's a moment between Seiya and his lifelong friend from his orphanage, Miho, in which she asks Seiya to stay with her instead of going off to fight. He explains that he wants to, but also that he has things that he has to do first. Things that only he can do. Duty and responsibility are life lessons that we all face at some point. The reality of doing what needs to be done before settling in for that long-lasting peace is something important that should be conveyed to everyone. While watching such a bombastic show, I was certainly entertained by the flamboyance and knockout brawls. However, it was ultimately this moment that stuck with me when it was all over. Spin things however you like, but this moment is the true meaning of Saint Seiya. The truth behind why violence is sometimes unavoidable. It's why violence was necessary in Saint Seiya. Not because blood makes for a good show, but because blood with purpose behind it is life. It's that blood that burns with compassion for our friends and family, which drives people to the point of sacrificing it so they may one day settle down for that peace we all talk about in our quiet moments.
I bet you didn't see that coming. After all that talk about wham blam fighty jams, pulled a little bit of smarty boy stuff out of my butt. Next week, we are going to be doing Full Metal Alchemist with Grant, the story you never knew. It's gonna be super awesome, but I would love to hear your answers to my questions. And if you want to send them to me personally, consider donating to our Patreon. All it costs is $1. You get right into the private Discord. And I'm there. I'm on beck and call. Just ask Cole. He asks how I'm doing every day. And with that, just like normal, we are going to shout out our lucky patron of the week, Cameron Thomas. Cameron, thank you so much for your continued support. We really appreciate you being here, helping the channel do what it does, so we can make videos on things that aren't trending like Saint Seiya. So anyway, one more time, I am Mike, this is Bonsai Pop. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you check out our social media. We got Twitter, we got Instagram. We don't really mess around with Facebook because Facebook kind of sucks. And with that, I'm out. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Next week, Grant, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I got a very special episode when I come back. It's going to be very cool, so I am excited to see you then. Alright guys, have a good one. Bye.
I've heard that the reason you called us all here is to assemble the best samurais.
This is a story about a man named Kenshin Himura set in 1878, the early Meiji era of Japanese history, but also a story about the man that Kenshin used to be, the deadly imperialist assassin Batosai the Manslayer. Rurouni Kenshin Meiji Swordman Romantic Story is one of my favorite anime. Also known as Wandering Samurai or Samurai X, it's a show I watched almost 17 years ago thanks to its run on Toonami.
I wasn't finished speaking.
Rurouni Kenshin premieres Monday, March 17th at 6:30. Only Toonami.
It's also one of my all-time favorite manga. While seemingly a simplistic shonen battle anime, Rurouni Kenshin is a multi-layered work steeped in real-world history and deep philosophical questioning about the nature of humanity, the effect of time, and the gray area between good and bad. Can a bad man do good things? Can a good man do bad things? Where is the line where someone becomes so rotten that they're irredeemable? These questions can not only be posed towards Kenshin, but ironically its creator Nobuhiro Watsuki, who for the last 2 years has been quietly reflecting on some pretty conflicting crimes he committed. Egregious mistakes can haunt not just a person's past, but their mind as well. Batosai the Manslayer seeks redemption, and the man who put pen to paper to create him does as well. But how much can you forgive? What does it take to forgive? How do we determine the penalty of past action? Kenshin has a conscience that never lets him forget the blood he spilled. What is true penance and what is true punishment? Can we expect someone to have a conscience? If we don't, are we not placing them in a hell of our own creation while they burn in a hell of their own? The Buddha said that life is suffering, and with that in mind, let's get into Rurouni Kenshin.
If you want to taste the ground, feel free to attack me.
Batosai the Manslayer. He is truly a man of legends.
We meet Kenshin in Tokyo in 1878. For the past 10 years, he's wandered Japan as a pacifist in order to atone for a life of violence and murder. He's a ronin, or swordsman without a master, and an ex-imperialist assassin of the Bakumatsu War. Now that's a lot of terminology which generally goes over the heads of casual viewers of the anime. The story of Kenshin is steeped in the history in which it takes place, the end of the Edo period of Japan and the beginning of the Meiji Restoration. Understanding this time period is key to understanding not only Kenshin, but the story itself. As a rule, Kenshin is sweet and soft-spoken, goofy and lovable. However, that is Kenshin, not Batosai the Manslayer. Like most socio-political renaissances, the Meiji era was not created through peace, and Batosai the Manslayer was not a man of peace. Kenshin was born around 1848, the winter years of the Edo period, which spanned from 1603 to 1868. This was a time of the shogunate, or bakufu, which are the same thing, as well as the samurai. For 200 years, Japan was ruled by the Tokugawa family, which is why history remembers them as the Tokugawa shogunate. A family of warlords, think mafia more than royals. The shogun were landowners and dictators. The samurai were a warrior class under the shogun, the muscle. Most of the battles Kenshin fights in the show are against ex-samurai and shogunate supporters. At the time, the Emperor of Japan had very little power and kind of just chilled in the capital, which was then Kyoto. But look, you could teach an entire college course on this subject, so I'll try to keep it brief and simple just for you. During the 200 years of the Edo period, Japan was isolated from the rest of the world. Things were divided by class. It was rigid, but it worked. Before the Tokugawa took over Japan, the country was at war for 150 years during what is now known as the Sengoku period. So in comparison, a little Edo classism was nice for a while. The country enjoyed the building of infrastructure, and for the first time, the people in the cities were able to relax, create, and educate themselves. Finally, peace was had for over 10 generations. Then in the middle of the 19th century, bam! America shows up and is like, hey, why don't you open your ports so we can fix our ships and maybe trade? And then obviously the Japanese were like, fuck you! So then America was like, well, we have dope new guns. And then they proceeded to show Japan what these new guns could do.
The devil's in charge here.
Hello, where can we find the person in charge?
Naturally, the ports were opened. However, this split the Japanese citizens between pro and anti-isolationism and made the shogunate look weak. The one thing Japan knew as a whole was that they could no longer protect their country from the United States or Europe. Something needed to change. The pro-isolationists wanted to restore the Japanese emperor to power and remove the weakened shogunate, so they ironically used the new weapons and tech from the Western world to seize control of the imperial palace and then the country in a bloodbath known as the Bakumatsu War. At the time, Kenshin Himura was 20 years old and the deadliest assassin of the imperialists. His role in the Bakumatsu War was to remove undesirables within the shogunate of their lives. He was a samurai dedicated to the cause of a new Japanese regime, Batosai, the Manslayer. While his intentions were in the right place, his actions brought nothing but pain, something he pushed aside during the war in order to do his job. The Manslayer was fighting for a new Japan, a place without classism, ruled by democracy, headed by the rightful heir to their country, the Emperor.
That night still sears my memory.
Are you certain that the Satsuma and Choshu clans have been forming an alliance?
I'm positive. Their hatred of the shogunate is well known.
However, in order to do that, he would have to help tear down a regime that unified Japan after 150 years of warfare and destroy the samurai class, leaving them with nothing, not even their pride. All of this would be done with the blade of his sword, his hands, and his hopes. It was a time of personal, physical, eye-to-eye combat. Taking a life with your own hands was far different from our projectile modern warfare. But Tosai the Manslayer watched the light leave the eyes of the men he slew. When the war ended, so did Batosai the Manslayer. But the name and the deeds lived on. Kenshin laid down his katana and pledged never to kill again. Instead, he picked up a sakabato, a weapon of peace, a sword with a reversed blade, a sword created to protect, not to kill. A weapon for the new Meiji era. The city of Edo was changed to Tokyo and the emperor left Kyoto to sit in the new eastern capital. Kenshin believed in the democracy that he helped set up, the new era of peace he fought to bring about, but was deeply scarred by the flames of war he bathed in as an adolescent. It's something that haunts his dreams and lingers in his mind at all times. Every step he takes is taken with the weight of his past on his shoulders. And for the next 10 years, he wandered alone as a ronin until fate forced him and a woman named Lady Kaoru together in the streets of Tokyo. She was finally someone to protect, to believe in, and eventually to love. Now, the effects of the Meiji era and the Bakumatsu War that brought it about are embodied in the cast of Rurouni Kenshin. Democracy and peace generally come at a heavy cost, and for Kenshin, it was the blood on his hands and his lack of purpose in place after the war. Lady Kaoru is an owner of a failing dojo. After the war, fighting was mostly over. Samurai were no more, and the new government banned swords. This ruined business for not only dojos, but sword makers as well. Yahiko is the orphan son of a samurai introduced as a street thief. Bitter and jaded, knowing that if his father's class wasn't dissolved, he would have lived a much better life. And Sanosuke, who eventually becomes Kenshin's best friend, hates the Meiji government Kenshin helped create. Sano was a member of the Sekihotai, a militant group who fought on the same side as Kenshin. As political extremists, they went about spreading the word of the new imperialist regime, including promises made by that new regime. Promises the Meiji government made but couldn't actually keep. The Sekihotai were then rounded up, called liars by the imperialists they aided in the Bakumatsu War, and put to death simply to cover the asses of the new government. This left Sanosuke completely alone with his anger, but together these four loners living with the after effects of a revolution eventually find themselves together with a lifelong bond of friendship, a bond that brings peace to Kenshin's soul. But is that too convenient? Is it right for a man who killed indiscriminately to find peace? This question is emphasized throughout the story as the ghosts of Kenshin's past continually show up to tempt him back to his murderous ways. Time and time again, he's met by people who exist to threaten the newfound stability of the Meiji era and the peace Kenshin has found with Lady Kaoru and his friends. His greatest desire is to maintain what he's found, but if he was to kill again, he knows he could never come back from it. He knows Kaoru could not look at him the same again, and he knows he could not be Kenshin any longer. His peace hinges on his ability to continue to suppress Batosai, the Manslayer. It's important to remember that there are two sides to every story, and by all accounts, the Edo period was a time of flourish for Japan. The cities built around shogunate castles created an economic environment that allowed for new industry, and for the first time in the island's history, leisure and stable peace. It's even said that the literacy rate in Edo, now Tokyo, was around 80%, which is an astronomical level for a pre-industrial country. While shogunate rule was strict and sometimes unfair for the peasants and super unfair for the hookers and the butchers, as Buddhism stuff, it was stable and prosperous. The peace was torn to shreds by Kenshin and the revolutionaries who simply hoped that there would be a better future for everyone. People who supposedly fought to maintain isolationism but turned around and opened the borders the second the war ended in order to take advantage of Western thought and technology. Nobody on either side of this fight was necessarily right or wrong. Thousands died for idealism or protecting what had kept the country peaceful for 200 years. Despite scarring his soul to help the emperor gain back his power, the Kenshin we see in the show no longer wishes to be associated with that government, at least not as an employee. His time of killing in the name is over, but the ghosts of past choices still haunt Kenshin. Behind his happy eyes is still a trained killer, a tiger under the surface that laid waste to the shogunate with his own hands, removed people's sons, fathers, and friends from this earth before their time. His personalities mirror the eras they belong to, Batosai of the Bakumatsu War and the bloody end of the Edo period, and Kenshin of the Meiji era, the restoration of peace. I find this to be the difference between a passionate, angry young man and a wiser adult. I think by 30, most of us have someone that they used to be under the lock and key of wisdom and experience. Kenshin fears the part of himself he keeps locked away. The losses he could incur from letting that man out are real and heavy. The narrative of Rurouni Kenshin is one of personal growth, dealing with the losses of the past, sticking to promises you make for the future, and coming to terms with the negative parts of yourself that don't simply go away. It's no coincidence that Kenshin's blade is turned inward. The Sakabato protects the attacker but is dangerous to the wielder, and Kenshin's main battle is within. With aid of his new friends, Kenshin first proceeds to protect the government and New Japan he helped create, and then redeem himself for his past mistakes. The fights on the outside are a mirror of his internal struggles. For example, Shishio was Kenshin's successor, a genius swordsman worthy of the title Manslayer. However, this ruthless man was burned beyond recognition and now physically represents the ugliness of Kenshin's past. Shishio's defeat at his own hands shows the way that hatred can burn you from the inside out. It's all a carefully conscripted lesson for the man with the reverse blade. There's always been something special about this story, something that made it more than it is, a simple period piece about a man seeking redemption. The manga is beautiful, well written, drawn, and paced. It even helped Eiichiro Oda into Shonen Jump at the age of 19, who then went on to create the masterwork known as One Piece. Kenshin was the first manga I read which shone a light on its creator, Nobuhiro Watsuki, in the end pages where he would talk about his work. I felt connected to the man at the time. I appreciated his revelation of his work process and his communication with his audience. That is the inspiration for our informative pinned comments we post below every video as a bit of a diary here on this channel. But as many of you know, there is a dark side to this that comes from Nobuhiro Watsuki. In 2017, the man who created this beautiful story was caught with explicit videographic material of adolescent females, aka CP, you know what I mean. I will be referring to this as cheese pizza because YouTube. I'm not an apologist. Cheese pizza is wrong in my opinion. However, there is some cultural context that is extremely valid in this discussion. It's important to remember that Japan is Japan, not America. It's not like America or anywhere else. It has a unique culture and history that is different from ours in many ways, including its religious foundations, which are a cornerstone of societal building. Many Western territories are Christian or biblically based. Our views on relations between two people are heavily influenced by the teachings of that book. Even for those of us who are not religious, it's ingrained in our social structure. Now, unlike America, creating cheese pizza was legal in Japan until 1999. Their national age of consent is 13. This doesn't mean it's 13 in every province of Japan. In many places like Tokyo, it's as high as 18. Where I live in America, it's 16. The laws are provincial, and the punishments for breaking those laws are different for men and women. Now, even after outlawing the creation of cheese pizza, possession of those images or videos was legal until 2014. Possessors of cheese pizza were given a 1-year grace period to dispose of their smut, and if caught after mid-June 2015, the offender was subject to a year in jail and fines up to $10,000 USD. Watsuki-san did not throw out his cheese pizza and was caught with some pie decked with under 15-year-old female toppings in his house and office. He was quoted by the Popo as saying, "I liked girls from the upper grades of elementary school to around the second year of junior high school." Yucky, dude. His current manga, Rurouni Kenshin Hokkaido Arc, was put on hiatus. He was publicly shamed and fined about $1,870 USD, which is a pretty light slap on the wrist in the eyes of myself as an American. I can't forget my filters or biases. It's important to note that he has never been accused of trespassing on a minor. The man is married and has been for a long time, and that in the eyes of the Japanese, he's paid for his crimes. In June, Hokkaido Arc started back up. So here's the big question, and I think it applies to both Kenshin and the man who wrote him. What is the line that makes people good or bad, or is there one at all? How do we differentiate between a good person doing bad things and a bad person doing good things? What does it take to redeem yourself? Can a bad person become good? Can good people become bad? Is it permanent or a phase? Kenshin was a murderer, a killer, a widowmaker. He did it in order to set up a government based on ideals with no guarantee of success after 200 years of peace. His actions in the line of duty he chose ruined the lives of so many people who were also simply trying to do what they thought was right. History often decides what's right and wrong in the end, and the acts of Kenshin will never outweigh the acts of Batosai the manslayer in the eye of the public. But to the audience who travels with Kenshin along his path to redemption, we get an intimate look at what it's like to make amends. So is he a bad man who's trying to do good? Could a bad man do good? And what makes a man truly bad? And what about Watsuki-san? The man is a pervert. He made his apologies, his crime was paid for in the eyes of the law and his people. He spent the last 30 years of his life making people happy and creating art for the world to enjoy. Art that in no way promotes his perversions. Granted, he spent some of the cash he made off of that art on cheese pizza in the interim, but he wrote Rurouni Kenshin. That's not excusing him. The point is the man understands the intricacies of redemption. Having walked that journey through not only a television show, but books as well, it's hard for me to imagine the man who created that not feeling guilty, conflicted, even wrong for his perverse tastes. Perhaps part of him is within Kenshin. Maybe it's not a coincidence that his best work is a redemption story. Doesn't make his actions okay, but what is he? Is he a bad man who did good things, or a good man who did bad things? What makes a person irredeemably bad? It's not my job to give you that answer. I can't give you that answer. I can pose the question for you to discover it yourself. The publisher, Jump Square, left us with this in perfect English. The author, Watsuki, spends his days reflecting and with remorse, and think as though it's our obligation as a publisher, as well as his as an author, make a way for us to reply through the work to the various opinions we've been getting. And so, from the July issue, which goes on sale June 4th, serialization will resume. Viz has not published the work in America to my knowledge. In the case of Kenshin, I think the line is easier to draw by justifying his actions with war. Obviously, it's okay to kill in a war, right? It wasn't his fault or anything, it's war. But is that just Western ideology? Or is it because we know Kenshin? Because we walk his path and we see inside his head? We suffer along with him on his road to redemption. We understand Kenshin. We're familiar with him. Is it the familiarity that sways our hearts to forgiveness rather than rationalism? Again, I'll leave that for you to decide. I feel secure in recommending this story to you. And while I love the anime and it's an absolute classic, I do recommend reading the original manga above it. It's a beautiful piece of art and an amazing read start to finish. I'm not asking you to support the man behind the work. I'm not telling you what you should do, but you know, you could always hoist that pirate flag, set sail on the internet ocean to pillage and plunder for some manga. But regardless, you tell me, is it art? Or is it the artist? For me, it's just Rurouni Kenshin, and I'd really like to cover it again someday. Hey everybody, what's up? Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. This was a little bit of a new thing for us. Generally, we don't go so deep into history, but it's something that I would really like to do in the future. Japanese history is kind of one of the things that I'm really passionate about. It's really fun to research, and I enjoy talking about it and teaching you guys. So if you liked that, definitely let us know and we will do some more. We definitely wanted to do some of that in our Demon Slayer video that we did back a little while ago, but we cut it down quite a bit because we were worried about audience retention, because that's a YouTube thing. Anyway, I have some awesome announcements for you guys. In September, on the 28th and 29th, I will be at Retro World Expo in Hartford. That is a video game convention. I will have some panels. It's a really fun little convention, and I hope you come down and see me. And then on November 2nd and 3rd, I will be in Atlantic City at J1Con, and that will be our very first anime convention as Bonsai Pop. It's gonna be really awesome. We got some panels down there too. It's right in a casino. Passes are super cheap. So check that out, J1Con, it's just J and 1. And I hope you come and see me. Definitely pick up your tickets. Other than that, it's been a crazy summer, just full of conventions and lots of traveling. I'm sorry that it took 2 weeks to get this video out, but we wanted to make sure that we did as good a job as we possibly could. And since it was Kenshin, it was so important to me, I really wanted to make sure that I did it justice. So hopefully I did. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I mean, you're still here. You must have liked something. But on to our ultimate lucky patron of the week. This week, it is Glad. Thank you so much, Glad, for your continued support. You're always active in our exclusive Patreon Discord. But we will have new stuff for you there very, very soon, I promise. Live shows, all sorts of stuff. It's gonna be great. So I think it's time to finally wrap things up. My name is Mike. Thank you for watching Bonsai Pop. Next week, we're going to be doing a video with Grant, a story you never knew, on Dr. Stone. So get hype, and we will see you then. Thanks.
I knew there was more to you than meets the eye.
Hito Batosai, a name which struck fear in the hearts of the shogunate during the waning days of the Edo period. A man who lived in the shadows, cutting down threats to the imperialist regime, earning himself the title of the slashing sword samurai man killer. There are few anime or manga that encapsulate the heart and soul of an era like Rurouni Kenshin. The story is a goldmine of history and culture. Last time we visited the series, we talked about the Meiji Restoration and the Bakumatsu War, but this time I wanted to dive into something a little different. What did it mean to be a samurai, and what did being a samurai mean to Kenshin? Picking up a sword and swearing an oath to kill in the name isn't something to be taken lightly. Throughout his story, we see the effects of this decision take its toll on Kenshin repeatedly, but he's not the only one whose samurai past bleeds into a future ruled by peace and progress. One does not live without a sword if said weapon breaks, and when Kenshin Himura walked away from his days of assassination, his abandoned position needed to be filled. But not all swords are created equal, and Makoto Shishio, while equally deadly, was a double-edged blade. Two samurai who held the same position for the same master left on extremely different terms. Having lost everything, Kenshin simply walked away. Shishio, on the other hand, reveled in his position, striking fear not only in those who met his blade, but his masters who attempted to hold his leash. During the final campaign of the Boshin War, the last civil war before the imperial seat took over Japan, Shishio was shot in the head by his own side, burned alive, and left for dead. Two legendary assassins, one scarred on the outside, the other on the inside. Two conflicting ideals, two contrasting personalities. They were destined to clash in one of the greatest climaxes in shonen history. So let's get into it. By the time we meet Kenshin, the true samurai is a thing of the past. Class was dissolved by the Meiji government, and what was left were men that were shells of their former selves. Ironically, until the time Kenshin and Shishio fought for the imperialists during the Bakumatsu and Boshin wars, samurai hadn't really been needed for their main purpose, warfare, for over 200 years. The Edo period, which preceded the Meiji Restoration, was a time of unprecedented peace brought on by our old buddies, the Tokugawa shogunate. However, the story of the samurai, which led to the decisive battle between Shishio and Kenshin, started long before the Tokugawa came to power in the early 1600s. Beginning back in 1185 AD, a ruling class of warriors came to power during the feudal era of Japan, who would become known as the samurai. These elite soldiers would protect their lords and Japan as a whole with their blades and their lives. The warriors would continue to maintain the country alongside the shogun and the daimyo for 676 years. So not only were Kenshin and Shishio samurai, but they were the last remaining members of a pedigree that ran for over half a millennium. In the 1896 book Feudal and Modern Japan, Arthur May Knapp wrote, "The samurai of 30 years ago had behind him 1,000 years of training in the law of honor, obedience, duty, and self-sacrifice. It was not needed to create or establish them. As a child, he had but to be instructed, as indeed he was from his earliest years, in the etiquette of self-immolation." Despite their deep and historical heritage, when Shishio and Kenshin finally cross swords, there is a missing factor that changes everything. A samurai is not a samurai without a lord to serve. While fierce warriors, they were also public figures, basically nobles. In feudal Japan, things were run by class, and the samurai were far up on the food chain. They had money, status, and a strict code of honor to adhere to. Their swords weren't just weapons, but status symbols that protected them from their enemies, shielded their lord, and garnered respect from those beneath them on the social chain. They were police, soldiers, bodyguards, and the fingers on the hand of their ruler. Ironically, like their former status of imperialist Hitokiri, Shishio and Kenshin's swords are also of the same origin, both made by the master swordsmith Arai Shaku. Shishio's Mugenjin is the most deadly of swords, self-sharpening, bathed in flammable body fat from his countless victims. Vicious and serrated, it was a sword of death. Kenshin's Sakabato Shinuchi is a plain reverse sword of incredible strength, but almost impossible to kill with. Two different swords made by the same hands for two different people with two different purposes to serve. However, Kenshin left his lord behind when he was done killing. He no longer belonged to the Meiji regime nor to anyone else. It's a sense of purpose that was left behind along with his honor, for there was nothing more shameful than abandoning your lord. Shishio, on the other hand, was betrayed by his lord and given a shameful, dishonorable, and cowardly death, a wound that did nothing to dissipate his power-hungry and sociopathic tendencies. And while these two men hate each other, there is a certain sympathy they must feel for one another, having lost their purpose and being tasked with creating a new one for themselves. It's much easier to be told what to do than to think for yourself. Part of being a samurai was spiritual in nature. It takes a lot to dedicate your entire being to a cause. Dedication to the point of willingly committing seppuku or personal disembowelment in the name of your own honor or the honor of your master. This was something that had to be done, guilty or not, of any crime if it was commanded of you, and something done willingly if a samurai felt his honor was in question. To live and to die by the sword takes an almost inhuman level of devotion, and this devotion was eventually summed up in the term Bushido, a word meant to describe the many and varied facets of the samurai code and way of life, the way of the warriors. While Kenshin and Shishio had no masters to pledge their swords to, they nonetheless had the same kind of single-mindedness attributed to samurai nature, though for extremely different ends. Kenshin, after years of bloodshed watching the life burn out of people's eyes as he removed his blade from their bodies, only wished for peace and to atone for what he saw as his wrongdoing. Hence the symbolism of his Sakabato, or reverse blade sword, a blade turned inward at itself, a constant threat against the Hitokiri that lived in his soul. On the flip side, Shishio saw his killing as less of an obligation and more of a divine right. As someone with power, he could use that power as he pleased to control those weaker than him or eliminate them entirely. As such, he used the philosophy of social Darwinism and the chaos of anarchism as an excuse to wage war on the new Meiji government, seeing it as weak and inferior to himself, a structure not fit for the proud nation of Japan, which for so long maintained its independence with ingenuity and pure willpower. While Kenshin saw this peaceful government as a way forward, a way for the disenfranchised to rise up and have an opportunity for a better life, Shishio saw it as an insult to those who had the strength to do it on their own, a disgrace to Japan. While in extreme contrast, both views are absolutely sincere. Bushido, while esoteric, is wholly defined by the action of sincerity. There are many facets to the code, but sincerity is by far of the utmost importance. Now, the structure of Eastern thought is vastly different from that of the West, and by that I mean the way these two cultures view every little thing in the world has differing significances. Bushido is governed by four ruling philosophies: Shintoism, Zen Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. Ironically, the core fundamentals of Zen, Taoism, and Shinto are in stark contrast with those of Confucianism, namely that Confucianism deals with extremely material facets of heavenly being, whereas the rest require far more spiritual practice. However, all of them have an explicit emphasis on sincerity, honesty, and right action. Right action is the most difficult to explain, but simply put, it's the act of acting without premeditation. It's doing the right thing without considering it first, being true to yourself and the basest of nature while remaining sincere, honest, and morally virtuous is a sign of an enlightened person. Sincerity is the difference between doing something and being something. These practices, coupled with the rigid social honor and respect of Confucianism, brought wisdom and sincerity to men who lived an otherwise violent life. What we see in Kenshin and Shishio is this practice in two lights. Kenshin is a reformed assassin, a pacifist who wishes to never commit violence again. Yet, when faced with being the only man in Japan who stands a chance of stopping Shishio, he confronts him head on. It could be said that his new master is peace, While viewed as a ronin, a disgraceful ex-samurai who wanders aimlessly, in truth, Kenshin has maintained his Bushido practice for a higher purpose. He pledges himself to an idea or concept in line with those teachings. Also, the same could be said for Shishio, however, his new master is only himself and his desires. In this way, the fight between Shishio and Kenshin can be seen as an allegory to Christ and Satan. Both men have the same father figure, in this case that being the imperial military, the god figure in this example. One of these men left to protect the rules and wishes of that reigning power while the other wishes to violently upheave it. And as we see, like Lucifer, Shishio is cast into hell. To requote Nap on the samurai, as a child he had but to be instructed, as indeed he was from his earliest years, in the etiquette of self-immolation. It's much easier to fight for a goal than it is to maintain the status quo. Ambition and desire fuels passion and power, and in the conflict between Kenshin and Shishio, Shishio is clearly superior, driven by aggression. However, his past punishment of being lit on fire left him with a severe handicap. His pores have been fused together, leaving him without the ability to sweat, and with not being able to regulate his body temperature, excessive action could lead to severe consequences. Normally, this would be something like a stroke or brain damage, average consequences of having essentially a fever. However, with his hatred and ambitions literally burning, he meets Kenshin's Hiten Mitsurugi Ryu head-on again and again, only to inevitably, spontaneously combust. They say that passions, ambitions, or hatred can consume you. Kenshin was a samurai to the end. His defensive blade was all he needed to defeat the monstrous Shishio. However, the same thing could be argued for Shishio as well. While his master was his own greed, he gave it the dedication and sincerity befitting the way of the warrior. He fought his predecessor and philosophical enemy head-on as a warrior with duty and self-sacrifice. But in the end, he failed to uphold the wisdom and serenity required of a true samurai following the path of Bushido, the way of the warrior, and thusly practiced the etiquette of self-immolation. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad that you came for our second Kenshin video. If you haven't seen our first one, you should definitely check that out. It was a lot of fun and it did really well. And next week begins the first year anniversary of the channel. So we have two special videos that we're going to be working on over the next couple weeks to celebrate that with you guys. It's going to be a good time. Also, speaking of covering anime a second time, let us know what episodes from last year were your favorites and what you would like to see us dive into again. And before I sign off, I got to send out two very special thank yous. The first is to Figurama Collectors for sending me this Thor statue and for sponsoring the video. Thank you, you guys are awesome. And the second shout out is to our lucky patron of the week, Lady Lavender. Thank you so much for helping us and supporting the channel. Thank you all for helping this channel grow to what it is today. And with all of that said, make sure that you follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That is at bonsai_pop on both of those platforms for extra content. And I suppose that's it. Watch our other videos. My name is Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. When I look back into anime that really defined my early watching, there's always one that exists as integral, but also as an outlier. That show is Inuyasha. Well, back then, most of my attention was drawn to power fantasies like Dragon Ball and Yu Yu Hakusho. I can easily say, looking back, that Inuyasha was something I remember actively looking forward to. While technically considered a shonen, this series highlights a romantic side of the two main characters, not as a subplot, but instead as a main focus. However, I suppose I'm already getting ahead of myself. Created by Rumiko Takahashi, who is best known for her series Ranma Half, which we will get to eventually, Inuyasha, or Inuyasha A Feudal Fairy Tale, debuted in Weekly Shonen Sunday mid-November in 1996 and quickly became Takahashi's main focus, longest-running series, and set the stage for what would inevitably end up being this isekai-riddled universe we find ourselves in now. While not the first isekai by any stretch of the imagination, it's easy to argue that Inuyasha was the first to popularize the genre on a massive scale during its launch on Adult Swim in 2002, where it ran until 2006, introducing the Japanese take on the in another world concept to the West. In this case, the other world being a version of the Sengoku Jidai of Japanese history, in which all manner of creatures from Buddhism, Shintoism, and Japanese folklore run rampant as the country tears itself apart. Right in the middle of it is a 15-year-old high school girl and a 200-year-old dog boy with a chip on his shoulder who have to stop Japan's biggest dickhead from becoming a yokai god. But there's so much more to this seemingly simple shonen, so let's get into it. So I'm just gonna go out and say it, Inuyasha is one of my favorite anime. It's got all the stuff you know I love, Japanese history, demons, and a buttload of sexual tension. There's also a lot of people who don't like the show, and their reasons are valid. First off, it is a long one, 167 episodes, plus a late game 26 episode wrap up called The Final Act. And if you think that's bad, then don't even look at the manga, which I'm currently reading, and after 170 chapters, I think I'm just getting out of season 2 in comparison to the anime. The action is consistent, but not always amazing, and watched out of continuation, the show can come off as a monster of the week kind of story lacking depth. But again, everything is about how you watch it. Here's the deal. We got Kagome, modern 90s Japanese schoolgirl whose family owns an ancient Shinto shrine. In that shrine is a mystical well her grandpa takes care of as the family priest. One day, Kagome falls into the well. Bam! She's transported back in time to the Sengoku period, which excites me. If you've been with us for a while, you know we've covered the Edo period in our Ninja Scroll video, as well as our Kenshin video, where we also talked about the Meiji Restoration. In our Demon Slayer video, we did a little lesson on the Taisho era as well. That is about 300 years of Japanese history, which is rad. Now the Sengoku period, however, predates all of that and is made up of roughly 200 years of complete chaos in Japan. The government had come crashing down, and basically all the rich lords were constantly at war trying to fill this power vacuum until eventually Oda Nobunaga showed up and ushered in the Edo period, which again, for the record, was a time of relative peace. However, the Sengoku was a time of strife, conflict, famine, and pain for the average person in Japan. It was the time of the ninja and a period where education was generally lacking, leading many to be extremely superstitious. Obviously, given the structure of Inuyasha, this time period is a perfect setting. Seeing as canonically Oda Nobunaga was alive during the time Inuyasha plays out, we can date Kagome's arrival to about 1555 AD. So again, she finds herself back in time, and before long, she's in front of a tree that has a dog-eared dude stapled to it with an arrow. At this point, Kagome is caught by local villagers and taken in by their leader, Kaede, a Shinto priestess. In the middle of the night, the village is attacked by a big titty centipede looking for something called the Shikan Jewel, and she chases Kagome back into the woods. Her cries for help wake up Inuyasha, who has been nailed and sealed to this tree for 50 years, and after having some of her guts ripped out by the centipede, it's revealed that the Shikan Jewel was inside Kagome all along. Centipede Lady eats it and loses all her Gentai potential, and as she's crushing Kagome and Inuyasha together against the tree, Kagome is left with a choice: free Inuyasha or die, and she very pointedly says, "I choose to live," as she pulls the arrow out of Inuyasha's heart. Right off the bat, there's a lot of symbolism in the first episode that will continue to play out and be explored throughout the rest of the series, but first, let's look at the Centipede Lady and the Shikan no Tama. This jewel, generally just called the Sacred Jewel in the anime, holds a large amount of spiritual power and can be purified or corrupted depending on who possesses it. And for the record, a yokai is essentially a Japanese ghost, fairy, or demon, which can range from possessed toilet paper or discarded umbrellas straight up to troll demons called Oni.
The Oni.
Like, you think there's a lot of Pokemon? The Japanese had hundreds of years to come up with yokai for literally anything and everything that does and does not exist. And this Centipede Lady is a warped Omokade whose evil nature and desire for the jewel turned her into what we see here. And that's not it. If you were to do a little research on just about any story in Inuyasha, you would find that most of, if not all, the yokai within these tales are twisted versions of a legitimate piece of Japanese folklore. The reason they're twisted is because of the hatred and evil that permeated the Sengoku Jidai. Now second, the Shikan no Tama is eventually swallowed by a crow yokai called a Yatagarasu. However, this is a Shibugarasu because it has 3 eyes instead of 3 feet. The crow is shot down by Kagome, however, her arrow strikes the jewel inside of it directly, breaking it and scattering it all over Japan, which sets the stage for the show to take place. Now her and Inuyasha, who for the record is a giant butt munch at first and is only out for himself, have to travel around the feudal era to collect the fragments of the jewel before it's gathered by someone or something with evil intentions. Now this is kind of a genius idea. There's no exact count of how many shards there are of this jewel, so the narrative has infinite time to weave itself through different characters and settings as it sees fit, and it does. Just a shard of this jewel grants anyone wielding it far greater power than they had previously. Part of the reason Inuyasha even accepted this quest to begin with is due to his desire to become a full yokai instead of a half yokai with the power of the jewel, a subplot we're not going to get into in this video. But this all sets up the ability for Kagome to come across nearly infinite scenarios where strange and altered creatures unfettered by a modern civilization run rampant with evil. But what I find even more interesting is Inuyasha's parallels to Dragon Ball. See, when Dragon Ball started, it was a far different show than what it came to be, obviously. The first arc was all about finding these sacred wish-granting balls, and along the way, Goku and Bulma pick up a group of strange friends to help them find these balls. It was an adventure story, not a power fantasy like it eventually became. Ironically, the course of Dragon Ball's history was changed thanks to the martial arts tournament craze in Japanese manga in the 80s, a craze that inspired Rumiko Takahashi to create Ranma Half. However, her later work Inuyasha would be far more derivative of the original nature of Dragon Ball, even adopting the Journey to the West formula we see quite often in Japanese entertainment, but particularly in Dragon Ball. So really quickly, Journey to the West is arguably the most famous story in the eastern part of the world, in which a monk tasked with a holy journey, a monkey named Sun Wukong, whose Japanese translation is Son Goku, a shape-shifting pig guy, and a godly general turned desert golem of sorts, journey across China fighting all sorts of demons and spirits to bring holy scriptures to where they need to be. Also, the horse is a character too, I don't know, it's a thing. Anyways, in Dragon Ball, obviously, Bulma takes the role of the monk, Goku is Son Goku, Oolong is the pig dude, and Yamcha would be the desert bandit. However, these archetypes are also in Inuyasha, yet almost more literal. Inuyasha takes the role of Son Goku, being powerful and wily and even devious at times, which is more accurate to the original Wukong. The Buddha's beads placed around his neck, which Kagome used to subdue him by saying "Sit!"
That's right, big sit.
They say that karma includes bad thoughts.
Is the exact same method used by the priest in Journey to the West to subdue Wukong. And then we have the rest of the party who gradually comes together, the shape-shifting Kitsune Shippo, and the lecherous monk with a black hole in his hand, Miroku, and then of course there's Sango, who I think was just added in to be awesome, and another female lead. But it's Kagome who is the most important as the central character, and while not ordained, she is a priestess or Miko with immense spiritual power. Of course, this is power she comes to realize and utilize slowly as time goes on to give the series a sense of progression. However, where everything truly comes together is in Kagome's counterpart Kikyo, Lady Kaede's older sister, who was the most powerful Miko of her time and guardian of the Shikon no Tama. Her and a wild Inuyasha fell in love and made a pact to relinquish their power and be together 50 years before Kagome falls through the well. However, they were tricked by the biggest dick in Japan, Naraku, which ended in them thinking they betrayed each other and resulting in both of their deaths. Now, Kagome is a reincarnation of Kikyo from the future, something that inevitably leads her and Inuyasha down a path of juvenile courtship, which is violently interrupted by an Oni named Arasue who brings Kikyo back from the dead. But like, not all the way. Kikyo comes back kind of warped. Her body is just grave dirt and clay. Her soul is tainted with hatred, and she becomes a major wild card for a long time. She survives by supplementing her body with the souls of deceased maidens she collects using creepy snake things called Shinidamachu. And what's worse is that her revival deeply burdens and confuses Inuyasha, leading to a lot of angst. It's reiterated many times within the series that Kikyo is very much dead and that she belongs that way, obviously that being the natural course of things. But for Inuyasha, her revival opens wounds that eventually would have healed had she not been thrust back in his face. Kikyo becomes a roadblock between him and Kagome, but also between Inuyasha and his past, and this is really where I want to highlight some of the genius of Rumiko Takahashi. While on the surface Inuyasha can come off as a B-grade action shonen, as a package, it is an in-depth look at love and what it can do, especially first love. It's something that shapes who we become later in life, and Kikyo and Inuyasha's love was tainted and taken from them along with their lives. However, Inuyasha was able to recover and rejoin a world Kikyo was no longer part of. The struggles brought on by her semi-revival are representative of what it's like to overcome love lost, and as we see with Inuyasha and how it affects Kagome, who is very much alive and of this world, it is a visceral experience. Inuyasha is torn between the past and the present and has major difficulty making a choice between the two, and those time periods are marked by two very significant women, Kikyo and Kagome, and time again, Inuyasha finds himself in the arms of Kikyo, who in reality is nothing but a ghost, a shell of what a person is. However, it's the memory of her and the intensity of the feelings they had which bring Inuyasha to the brink, as Kikyo has no qualms admitting that she does intend to drag Inuyasha to hell with her. And I think to write this kind of story requires someone to have literally felt this way before, because that kind of passion isn't something you can just synthesize. Personally, my first love was very intense. It came in freshman year of high school, and it was a time when I desperately needed that kind of affection, something to believe in. And that need sent the flames of that love out of control, and within a year, it had burned out. Not for me, but for her. And the absence of that feeling left me with a hole in my gut for years, because the need doesn't just go away. I also lost a girlfriend once. It's a long, complicated, and very sad story that I'm not ready to totally get into. But after I finally got the courage to leave her and the horrible life she had me nailed to, she ended up dying 2 months later, leaving me with a ghost. Obviously not literally, but certain memories do feel like they haunt you in a way, you know what I mean? And Inuyasha and Kikyo died hating each other, only to find out post-mortem that that hate was synthesized by a third party. But it's something that happened in the past. It's something that needs to be dealt with so that Inuyasha can live, both literally and metaphorically. In the beginning, I mentioned Kagome's first direct statement to Inuyasha: "I choose to live." And I think that underneath everything in this show, which believe me, I have only scratched the surface of, is the true message. That each day we choose to live, that we have to choose to live, because to quote Lady Kaede, time does not move forward for the dead. And what is death but an end to things? Moments, eras, feelings, and once gone, time no longer moves forward for them, but instead leaves traces of what once was, or ghosts. It's why moving forward is sometimes the hardest, but always the most important thing to do. So, anyway, what happens with Inuyasha, Kagome, and Kikyo? Well, you either already know or you don't, so I recommend before we do another video on the subject that you watch the show, or watch every single one of our other videos 6 times while I get to work on it. Hey, thanks so much for making it this far into the video. There's so much left to talk about when it comes to Inuyasha. I mean, there are characters that we didn't even mention, like Sesshomaru, or Jokin, or Myoga, or Naraku even, really. Like, we barely talked about him at all, but it's so difficult when you have such a long series with so many characters to really give everybody the time that they need in one video. So we are going to be coming back to Inuyasha again, definitely. One of the things that I wanted to mention before we ended the video was that I actually prefer watching this one in the dub. Yeah, I know that's not something that you're really supposed to say as a professional weeb, but the dub is excellent, and I very much prefer the voices that are done in the dub over the subbed version. I think that they got Inuyasha's character very well. His attitude and kind of his like goofiness, like there's a lot of humor in the show that I didn't really talk about very much. And if you're interested in reading the manga, I would like to say that the anime is very faithful to the manga as far as I've seen so far. I'm about 200 chapters in, and I don't think that there's anything that the anime didn't miss or even make better. The only thing that the manga has that the anime doesn't is that it's very crude. Like there's a lot of unnecessary cursing in the manga, which is funny. Like obviously cursing doesn't bother me at all. I do it all the time, but it's just like every other word in the manga. Enough blabbering though, we have to get down to business. So I would like to first thank our very special lucky patron of the week, JJ. Thank you so much for being an awesome Bonsai Pop patron, being in Discord, and just doing your thing, helping us out. Seriously, without Patreon right now, we would be totally screwed. YouTube is having a really tough time with the economy being kind of in the dumpster, so
we're there, we're with you guys. We understand how you're feeling, but thankfully we have some very, very helpful, supportive people that are kind of trying to help push us through this. So secondly, I have to thank our very special Super Saiyan God level tier Patreon guy of the week, who is the school bus, rocking that Discord Nitro boost. Thank you for that. That is awesome. And man, just a generous donation. You've been here since the beginning, or the very, very close to it. So thank you for sticking with us as long as you have. School bus, and love the Kana avatar. As always, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That is bonsai_pop at bonsai_pop on both of those. Check us out on Twitch, where I do streams. I just got my Dreamcast stream setup going on, so I'm going to be streaming in the highest quality a Dreamcast can put out. It's good, it's beautiful, it looks great. I'm very happy about it. And that is twitch.tv/bonsaipop. And as always, I'm Mike. This is Bonsai Pop, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Naruto? What? Why is Bonsai Pop covering Naruto? Look, hear me out. Naruto changed my life. I honestly cannot tell you how much I despised Naruto when I was in high school. It was a little past my time, so it was mostly freshmen and middle school kids running around with their arms out and wearing goofy headbands and being absolutely intolerable weebs. And for a relatively edgy young adult rocking in punk bands at the time, Naruto instantly came off as straight up cringe. But one day in my early 20s, I was bored, so I decided to watch it. Something came over me, an idea. Know your enemy, right? You see, what I figured was that if something is incredibly popular, there must be something good about it. Something that speaks to the audience in a way that anybody can understand it. So I sat down and I watched episode 1, 720 episodes, and 2 months later, I had finished what is still one of my favorite anime of all time. And in preparation for this episode, I took a week in October and I read the entire manga, so I think I am prepared for our first of what I am sure is to be many videos on the masterpiece. And I do not say that hyperbolically. That is Naruto. Let's get into it. Now, just so you know, when I say Naruto, I mean the whole thing, the original and Shippuden together. I mean, it's all one story of the gutsy ninja Naruto, so there's no reason to disambiguate. But man, like, where do you even start with this one? I can tell you my favorite characters are Master Guy and Rock Lee, or that I can't tell if it's Naruto or Sakura who is the biggest Sasuke simp, but I guess I'll just flip on a little bit of Wu-Tang and let it flow.
Shaolin shadowboxing. And the Wu-Tang sword style. Do you think your Wu-Tang sword can defeat me?
No matter who you are, how old you are, where you come from, there's something within Naruto that is going to speak to you. The mangaka Masashi Kishimoto went through a ton of trial and tribulation in his own life in order to produce this story, and his wisdom is sprinkled throughout the entire narrative. While the series is technically a shonen, there's many aspects of it that border on a seinen anime. I was actually pretty shocked at the amount of blood and visceral violence on my first watch, but you know I like that stuff, so obviously it just leveled up the experience. Naruto himself is more or less a perfect underdog, at least at the start. He's an outcast, a class clown, a prankster. It all comes from his desire for attention. Not only is he a ninja ward of the state, but everyone just kind of hates him. So he's a punk. He deflects the hate by acting out in order to deserve that hate. And as someone who is certainly an angry young man at one point, Naruto's character is a scathing reflection. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who can relate to that. And just like any other disenfranchised young person, his main desire is acceptance, so he's always shooting for the stars. In his case, specifically becoming Hokage, i.e. the most powerful and respected shinobi in the village of the Hidden Leaf. A ninja rock star, and naturally he constantly falls flat on his face in his attempts to become better and own his skills. It also doesn't help that he's partnered with the class genius and bad boy Sasuke, who's just good at everything and is also a total dick. On top of that, Naruto's crush Sakura is there as well, but she's head over heels for Sasuke and hates Naruto. The poor kid's ineptitude is constantly constantly thrown in his face. You see, I've noticed lately that people seem to feel really bad about themselves, like more than ever, and I think part of that is how big the world is now. Growing up, I think a lot of us had a Sasuke, but with the advent of the internet, it's like there's a million Sasukes for each person. Like, I used to think I was good at Smash Bros, right? And then the internet showed me that I don't even know what Smash Bros is. How are we supposed to feel good about ourselves, and what do we do when there's some 12-year-old already kicking our asses at what we've been practicing for years? How are we supposed to march on with people like Eyepatch Sensei pumping out classics and getting all that love? Well, I'll get there. You see, there's a lot of
hate in the shinobi world of ours. I've always wanted to do something about all of this hatred. I'm just not quite sure how to go about it as of yet. But I truly believe that eventually the day will come when all people will understand one another and live in harmony.
One of Naruto's greatest strengths as a series and my biggest obstacle as a creator is its wealth of characters. Anything that the main cast lacks is made up by its amazing cast of supporting characters. Each one is an individual with their own beliefs and problems and philosophies, from mentors like Kakashi and Jiraiya to peers like Shikamaru, Neji, and Gaara. However, each and every shinobi exists within a world of constant conflict which breeds hatred and fear, but also close bonds between individuals. And nobody knows hatred and fear or the importance of bonds like Naruto. You see, Naruto is a Jinchuriki, meaning he has a Biju stuck inside of him, and his Biju, the nine-tailed fox Kurama, is a particularly nasty entity. And while this makes for interesting storytelling, it's also a physical representation of the hate that lives within people, the anger and jealousy and wrath that we work to hold down in order to exist within the bounds of societal norms. At first, when Naruto is in danger or particularly pissed off, the fox seeps out, taking over his senses and granting him an instant boost in power and ability. It's a very Star Wars given to the dark side kind of motif, the idea that giving in to the primal instincts within gives immediate and great power, whereas controlling those instincts gives one the wisdom and discipline to wield that great power more effectively. Philosophically, Naruto as a series is a powerhouse. Like his character, Naruto's personal ideology is extremely simple. I never go back on my word. However, there is power in simplicity, and especially tenacity. It takes a lot of willpower to never go back on your word, especially when extraneous circumstances come into conflict with said pledges. Going with your gut takes a lot of courage, but also confidence, which, like I mentioned before, is something this modern shinobi world is lacking. It's hard to be self-assured when it seems like the world is constantly trying to remind you that you are subpar. Maybe you're an artist with 15 followers on Twitter, or a musician trying to get noticed on Bandcamp, or a lawyer fighting for partner, or us trying to climb the ladder of Anitube. No matter what you do, there always seems to be someone ahead of you, doing better than you, moving past you with ease. We're always chasing the backs of those in front of us, and realistically, that's never going to change. It's just far more obvious now because everything seems to have a numerical value attached to it. However, it's important to remember that you can hike the same mountain as your senpai, but take a completely different route. If you don't give up, you'll reach the top in your own way. And at the same time, while you're chasing somebody else's back, somebody is going to be chasing your back. And I think what matters most is who you are at the top, much more than the fact that you got there. Experience is what differentiates us. Someone who gets a helicopter ride will never know the crags and canyons like someone who climbed them. The whole ordeal is frustrating. There's too many people looking up or looking down. This world needs more eye contact. Now, while eventually the story of Naruto comes into conflict with his character, the core idea of the narrative remains firm. Unfortunately, Naruto goes from being this underdog nobody to someone not only special, but special from birth. Much of his ability is genetic or enhanced by his Biju. It's kind of a bummer. But I think Kishimoto sensei realized that and made an effort to keep Naruto in check by forcing him to realize that no matter how powerful he becomes, he will always need the help of others, which is juxtaposed against many of the antagonists in the series going solo against the world, especially Sasuke. There is a very cyclical nature to the story that simplifies the real world experience of bequeathing the future to others. We get to literally see how will and ambition and skill are passed down generation to generation through characters like Pain and Orochimaru. We see how sometimes that will can be twisted, but through Jiraiya and Naruto, we can see how will can eventually break a cycle. Our time on this planet is random and short. Ideas and hopes aren't always something that can be achieved during a single lifetime. In fact, more often it takes multiple generations for these dreams to snowball into reality. That doesn't mean lighting the fire is not worth it. Just because you don't get to see the end result. Doing something is always better than doing nothing. MLK didn't get to see his dream come true, but people are out there fighting still to improve our country for everyone. Speaking of which, Naruto is an excellent example of inclusivity in anime and manga. The village hidden in the clouds is not only full of, but run by people of color, and it's never even mentioned or pointed out. That's just the way it is, and it's dope. Within the shinobi world, it's totally normalized and respected. And then there's the rapping Killer Bee, one of the best characters in the series and 100% a Wu-Tang Clan reference, lending even more credence to Kishimoto sensei, so you best protect your neck cause the Killer Bees gun swarm. Bee is not only incredibly powerful and respected, but he's also enlightened and at peace with his bijou. Like Jiraiya before him, he becomes a bit of a spiritual mentor to Naruto, and the Waterfall of Truth is a particularly powerful moment in the story. In order to fully utilize his abilities as a Jinchuriki, Naruto has to face a part of himself he'd rather not see. And if you don't think that we all have that, you're kidding yourself. We have a person that lives inside of us that we absolutely despise, maybe even fear, someone we couldn't tell our closest friends about. At first, Naruto's strategy is to attack this shadow version of himself, but that's not exactly how it works, is it? Unfortunately, the worst part of ourselves are still part of us. You cannot remove it like a tumor. The only thing you can do is accept it and learn to incorporate it into yourself until you are a truly homogeneous mix. You see, no matter how bad that part of you may be, it still exists as part of the reason you're climbing whatever hill you're on, and you'll never make it to the peak unless you know why you're there in the first place. What do you really want? What is your goal? Personally, for me, I want to know everything about everything so one day I can create something spectacular. I want to know the ins and outs of everything I'm passionate about and distill it into exactly what I'm missing, what I've always wanted to see. And this video here is just practice. I'm always practicing, always reaching higher. In the shinobi world, for the first Hokage, Hashirama, Jiraiya, and eventually Naruto, the goal is to someday lead the world towards understanding, to stop the spread of hate just a little bit more, to create just a little bit more unity. And all of that starts with the individual learning to accept yourself and then to accept others. And in reality, that's all you can do. You can't expect things from other people, but you can be the change that you want to see in the world. And I think if we all did that, we'd see the world become a better place. Even to this day, unfortunately, Naruto gets a bad rap, and I'm gonna be honest, as an anime, it is not perfect. There is a lot of filler in there that you'll have to either sit through or use a guide to avoid. However, having both watched and read the series, I can succinctly say that the anime does add to the overall experience. You get more time with the other characters, you get to know them much better than you do in the manga, and you get to see how they impact not only Naruto himself, but the other minor characters as well, to the point where they're each fleshed out enough to do entire episodes on. And I don't mean just in the anime, I mean here on Bonsai Pop as well. There is an intricate web of relationships and alliances and hopes that permeate the narrative and bring the world of Naruto to life in a way the manga just did not have room for. Even Ichiraku Ramen kind of becomes a character in its own way in the anime, which again, the manga just didn't accentuate as hard. But here's where we come full circle back to my original question. How are we supposed to feel good about ourselves when things are always so covered in doubt? When the mountain in front of us seems too high to even begin climbing? Well, the answer is simple, but the action is hard. Never give up. For instance, Bonsai Pop didn't start out of nowhere. Tyler and I have worked for 6 years to get here. We failed many times before we could bring you a little video about a gutsy ninja. This summer in particular was one of the hardest we've faced on this platform, but we're back, baby. We pushed through, we fought on, our friends and our patrons helped us along the way. Nobody walks through this world alone, no matter how much hate there is. And even if you feel like you're alone, you're here with me right now. I made this video for you. Maybe you liked it. Obviously, we have something in common, right? So think about that. And in the meantime, go watch Naruto or read it. There's so much to love. So yeah, Naruto changed my life. It showed me that maybe if you think you hate something, you'll end up loving it in the end. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I just wanted to give a very special shout out to our super lucky patron of the week, Torin 2 Sequel, our Super Saiyan God of the Week, Toxic Coon, and of course our top tier patron, Alpha Sigma. Thank you guys so much. Make sure to check us out on social media. Look at that link in the description for those disc plates, and watch every single other video we ever made because they're all really good, I promise. Anyway, I'm Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. Yu Yu Hakusho is the story of a teenage boy named Yusuke Urameshi, a Yakuza-like punk, a street thug delinquent with a shoddy home life and a chip on his shoulder, and then he dies. Instead of this being the end of the series, it's the first episode, and instead of being whisked away to an alternate reality where he gets a harem and superpowers, he's dead. What? Yusuke is left to think about his life, and we're left to think about his death. In the midst of cursing out a little boy's ignorance about traffic safety, Yusuke jumped in front of a speeding car in order to save that boy's life, sacrificing his own. A move nobody saw coming from a good-for-nothing street brawler, nobody including the bureaucracy of the afterlife, leaving Yusuke to roam as a ghost with Botan, the guide of the River Styx. It isn't until his own funeral that Yusuke learns a valuable lesson about life, about what it means to have made connections and how humans feel when those connections are severed prematurely. His neglectful mother mourns his passing by drinking herself into catatonia. His greatest enemy, Kuwabara, is inconsolable at the loss of his arch nemesis and favorite rival. A childhood friend, Keiko, whom Yusuke sexually harasses on a daily basis, is devastated. Even the principal of the school Urameshi hated so much is pained by the loss of potential that was Yusuke. The takeaway is no matter how much you may hate yourself and the world around you, you have irrevocably touched people you never expected, and if you disappeared, you would leave behind a hole that simply can't be filled. If I was to encapsulate everything I enjoy about the medium of anime, it would just turn into Yu Yu Hakusho. If anime is truly punk rock cartoons, Yu Yu Hakusho stands as a shining example of what anime is. Unlike so many shonen battle stories, the series takes time to delve into its cast, creating a troupe of complex characters to guide you through its narrative. Their relationships with each other, the world around them, and their place in it are put on display for the audience to fully engage with until the final episode. For myself, Yu Yu Hakusho was a life-changing experience viewed through the perspective of Yusuke Urameshi. To date, it is still my favorite anime of all time. So without further ado, let's just get into it. On Saturday, February 23rd, 2002 at 11 p.m., I was sitting in my grandmother's living room watching TV. That night, 18 years ago, a brand new show was premiering on Adult Swim. Not that I knew or cared, but when it came on, I was glued instantly. It was Yu Yu Hakusho, and I was 10. There was something immediately visceral about the attitude of the show. There was mild cursing, blood, panties, demons, death, superpowers. I had already seen Ninja Scroll and Heavy Metal 2000, but to catch something like this on TV at the time was new. It felt kinda naughty, but it was accessible to a young kid forming his personality. Eventually, an edited version of the show made it onto the standard Toonami block, and by that time I had picked up a guitar and started my first punk band with some friends from middle school. Looking back now, I understand exactly why Yusuke in this anime in general stuck out to me as much as it did, and why I continue to rewatch it as much as I do. During my formative years when it was airing, its themes resonated with what I was going through. I was a dissenting, arrogant young male with a chip on his shoulder and a lot to prove. I felt poor in my middle-class white bread town, and I didn't really fit in with the kids in school. I was getting heavily involved in the political punk scene. I was angsty and pissed off at our government and at the war, at our country, at pretty much everything. Yusuke, like most young men, is polarized, a fierce, hardened asshole on the outside and a bleeding heart on the inside. Duality is woven into this entire show with such natural and eloquent methods that it's easy to forget that you're watching an animation instead of a real person growing up. The same goes for Kuwabara and the rest. Even the cynical Hiei has Shrek-like layers that are continually peeled back as the narrative travels along its path.
It's best to watch her from a distance. Is that why you got that fake eye put in? Nonsense.
I felt a certain kinship with these characters that is rare and special. While I wanted to create loud, fast, aggressive music, I only did it with the intention of getting across a point, that there's injustice in this world. Injustice for people that bled like everyone else but didn't fit the mold society carved out for them. I wanted to entertain, but more importantly, to educate. Guided by the ironic in nature Grim Reaper Botan, Yusuke eventually regains his life and becomes an agent of the spirit world, a spirit detective, finally cementing the idea of the show's title, Yu Yu Hakusho, literally Poltergeist Report. It becomes his job to investigate supernatural activity in the human world caused by the demon world. Because of its very specific style, Yu Yu Hakusho stands as a period piece as well as an action show. It has that 90s anime appeal, but more than that, the characters dress realistically and change clothes regularly. Hairstyles, vehicles, the high-waisted pants all work together to paint a realistic picture of the human world our hero occupies. This also works to solidify an emotional attachment to the series cast. Dualistic natures and a constant struggle against injustice while still working to retain optimism and finding time to to laugh are qualities not often fleshed out in fight mangas. While Dragon Ball Z will always have a place in my heart, there's only one filler episode I can recall that I enjoyed. That of course is the episode where Piccolo and Goku learn to drive, but other than that, I was waiting for the fight. Even still, some of the fights would get boring after 5 episodes of yelling and exposition. I never had that issue with Yu Yu Hakusho because the characters seem more like real people, like real friends, and watching them interact is just fun because they have the depth to be fun and carry a moment by themselves.
You believe in mercy, don't you?
No.
There is consistency to their personalities that allow them to stand out in a conversation as well as a battle. For example, in the Saint Beast arc, Hiei goes from completely hating his team to developing an actual relationship with his group. It's a complete turnaround from wanting to kill Yusuke to finding a semblance of respect for him. That's not to say he doesn't continue to be an asshole, but there's a glimmer of hope for him under all that cynicism. While character and world development are very well handled in this anime, it doesn't take away from the battles, which are not only top tier, but above and beyond. Together, Team Urameshi rounds out a Dragon Quest-like party. You have Yusuke the monk, who has extraordinary fighting ability coupled with the iconic awesomeness of a spirit gun. I mean, seriously, like, it doesn't get any better than that. It's simply a stroke of genius. And Kuwabara is the warrior character, a tank type who often gets the worst beatings but comes through in the end with his sword. Kurama is a whip-wielding mage capable of healing and killing with fluid ease, and then there's Hiei the thief, who can also summon a dragon from hell. I don't know. It's an incredibly well-balanced team along with their supporters and foils. Together they take off against a rainbow of enemies who look like they were ripped from my favorite arcade fighter of all time, Darkstalkers. Yusuke is employed by the son of the Buddhist ruler of the dead, King Yema. This son, Koenma, is a multi-millennia-old toddler who also plays the role of grizzled police chief. Kuwabara's sister is tougher than he is, but more comfortable with her softer side as well, and Botan is a sister type Yusuke never had, and his teacher Genkai is a parental figure Yusuke was denied by his own mother. A key theme when all the puzzle pieces are put in place is that family is what you make it. A broken home isn't necessarily a broken world, it's just a crummy piece of it. And together, this ragtag group, occasionally joined by Keiko and Yukina, forms a family unit you can't help but enjoy watching interact with its world and plot devices. Which then leads us to arguably the pinnacle of the series, the Dark Tournament. When Yusuke comes face to face with the younger Toguro, for the first time in his life, he hits a wall. Toguro is something seemingly impossible to overcome, a strength so superior it's staggering. After his utter psychological defeat, Yusuke and his friends are forced into the Dark Tournament, a brutal fighting competition hosted by corrupt, despicable humans. The irony in this scenario is exactly what Yu Yu Hakusho is all about. Up until this point, it's Yusuke versus the supernatural, the demons and the poltergeist. But as the show progresses, so does the intricacy in its writing. No longer is everything so cut and dry, and for the first time, the lines between humans and demons begin to blur. The Dark Tournament is run by greedy, corrupt businessmen wishing to gamble on life and death. It draws some of the nastiest demons looking for the ultimate prize, which is a wish for anything they want. Being special guests, Team Urameshi has no option but to fight lest they and their loved ones be assassinated. And naturally, the audience is mostly demons who want nothing more than to see the bastard spirit detective gruesomely killed in a brawl. The entire spectacle is set up against Yusuke and friends, so once again, Yusuke is the underdog. However, instead of corrupt teachers out to ruin his social standing, it's corrupt, powerful men out to stop him from interfering with their criminal dealings with demons. The entire event being rigged makes each and every accomplishment that much more satisfying and each and every loss that much more devastating. The arc is less about fighting the big bad, but once again about overcoming injustice and dealing with corruption. The latter of those themes is far more applicable to the average person. It's very rare to have a singular, horrible enemy. It's far more likely to be muddled by faceless organizations with power over you. And just when it seems like things can't get any worse, Toguro kills Genkai. While still covered up by his usual brashness, Yusuke's relationship with Genkai is extremely intimate and important to him.
Okay, you're a great lawnmower. Does this have a point, or are you just bragging?
She is truly the only adult role model he ever had and the only teacher he ever respected. Before her death, she gives Yusuke one last gift and passes on her power to him. And accepting this part of her into himself is agonizing. It almost kills Yusuke. During this trial, his spirit beast Pooh is also racked with pain. Pooh is a reflection of Yusuke's inner soul, and at this time, he's still a cute little Kirby-looking character who is extremely attached to Keiko breakup. While Yusuke suffers, Pooh comes to him in an attempt to help but collapses. Watching Pooh struggle, Yusuke comes to his senses, and these two sides of the same coin come together to pull themselves through. It's a metaphor of self-acceptance. While this could be the final takeaway in a less rounded anime, Yu Yu Hakusho moves right on through to grief. While self-acceptance is important, even mandatory for a healthy person, it's not the only struggle we go through in life. The death of Genkai is incredibly hard on Yusuke in particular. Neglect is sometimes worse than physical or mental abuse. It can leave a person resentful, bitter, closed off, and the barrier they create is to protect that sufferer from allowing themselves to be neglected again, because neglect comes from care and attachment. While Genkai represented things that Yusuke hates,
You've always quit anytime the answer wasn't served on a silver plate. Shut up!
like power and authority and responsibility,
This time I won't go easy.
she never gave up on him and spoke to him on his level.
Does it hurt? Slacker! Did you come all the way here just to give me more of your crap?
I promise I'll push as hard as I can.
She became an adoptive mother figure. She showed him how to care for another person and how to accept himself, and then she dies.
Come on, Genkai! What am I supposed to do?
Now, Yusuke must learn how to move on alone again, but alone for a whole new reason. He has to learn what true strength is alongside his friends instead of being taught by a mentor. He has to learn the difference between abandonment and death, and how to move forward and connect with people despite the risk of both. But then again, that's what Yusuke has been moving towards all along. His death was the first brutal reminder of what can happen if you're connected to people around you, even ones you barely know. The characters in all their depth show the consequences and benefits of attachment. While attachment can bring suffering, the benefits of intimacy can be life-changing in a good way. Beneath Yusuke's hard outer shell is a heart of gold that must come out, but is tested by the cruel reality that nothing lasts forever besides conflict. The learned fact that human nature and the nature of demons are not so far apart, and the continuing escalation of dire circumstances leaves Yusuke to wonder about the purpose of existence while simultaneously giving that existence purpose by connecting it with others. And it doesn't even stop there. As the show continues to progress, Yusuke continually comes up against philosophical disturbances regarding the nature of humanity, and duty, and more. New power is a new door to tests of will and character. Wrapped up in a battle shonen with a serious attitude is a roadmap to adulthood. Behind the vicious battles and extreme twisting, warped animation of these conflicts lies a story about a 14-year-old and his friends learning what it means to be alive, what it means to care about something and feel responsible without letting that responsibility devour you. It's important to remember that you can't take on the world alone, that there are issues that you can't solve by yourself. Even Yu Yu Hakusho's creator Yoshihiro Togashi himself had to throw in the towel at the end, admitting that the stress and pressure was too much to continue publication of his manga. Sometimes there are challenges we can't completely overcome, but the fight, the effort, is what defines us. The greatest challenge for a boy whose story begins with self-sacrifice is learning that his life is just as precious as the others around him, that the strands of death connect all of us. It's clear that this street punk feels that life is precious, but it's accepting that his own is equally so, which allows him to find the strength to continue to fight. You can't only live for others, and you can't only live for yourself. It's finding the balance between the two that leads to a brighter future. Obviously, we barely even scratched the surface of Yu Yu Hakusho. I mean, there's just so much that we could cover. Every single one of the characters could have their own episode, so make sure you subscribe and you hit that bell because we will definitely be doing more in the future. Like I said, this anime is still to date my favorite of all time. I don't know what it is, but there's something that keeps me coming back to it over and over again. So I'd like to be able to share as much of that with you guys as possible. Keep your eyes open because next week we have a very important video that is coming out midweek. I know that's strange for us. Don't worry, we will still have another regular full Bonsai Pop video for you on Saturday. And with everything out of the way, it's time to congratulate our newest Super Saiyan God, Calamity Cookie. My dude, thank you so much for joining up to Patreon and just coming in like a freaking hurricane, man. And your message to me was extremely kind and really made my day. So thank you so much. That is Calamity Cookie. I'm Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you so much for watching and making it till the end. Next time we're covering Hunter x Hunter. Check out our social media. It's down there. Twitter, Bonsai_Pop. Instagram, Bonsai_Pop. Check those out. And I'll see you next week. I am so happy to be talking about Yu Yu Hakusho again. It has been a year since we covered this series and I've basically been thinking about it non-stop. What am I gonna do next time? See, Yu Yu holds that special place. It hits on those nostalgic vibes just like City Hunter, but also gives you the good shonen power fantasy of its contemporaries like Naruto and Dragon Ball. I love this series, so I figured, what's a story without a main character? But then I was like, okay, I can't write a whole video about Botan, so it looks like I'm going with Yusuke. In all seriousness, Yusuke Urameshi is my favorite shonen protagonist. He is a multi-layered character that is beyond his time. Real, raw, emotional, and conflicted, a perfect description of a young person facing life rolled into a story about death. This also marks the first time we are covering a single character rather than a series. I figured we covered 71 anime for you. It's time to get a little deeper into our favorites. So get ready for a big fat spirit gun to the heart. This is Yusuke Urameshi. Let's get into it. Hey guys, this is Mike. Thank you so much for making it to the video. I just wanted to put it out there that if you want to support the channel, Bonsai Pop Patreon is the best place to go. We have an amazing community. It's more like a family, and it is honestly the best anime community on the internet. I say that with full confidence, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that can back that up. In fact, I know there is, or they're probably in the comments right now letting you know. Anyway, give it a look, patreon.com/bonsaipop. Lowest tier is $1. It gets you right in that Discord, gets you communicating with the other people. You get a little bit of a Patreon show. Thank you so much for your consideration, and on with the show. Yusuke Urameshi is dead. At least that's how he is when we meet him. I remember seeing this as a kid and being like, oh, here we go, boy. Mostly because this was pre-isekai phase, the days before death meant being whisked away to another reality with some device from the modern world, like, I don't know, in another world with my toothbrush or some shit. Also, I'd like to shout out one of the OG Truck-Coons right here making an appearance. Always good to see Truck-Coon killing another anime pro tag. Love it, love it. But yeah, Yusuke is dead as fuck, smeared across the road like a Tennessee armadillo, but it's quite literally why he died that sparks this entire story. You see, Yusuke is kind of an asshole, or at least that's how people see him, except Keiko. You gotta love a kind-hearted girl who notices, you know? But anyway, this kid skips school, he beats on punks from other schools, he's basically a Yakuza in training. Bad attitude, no respect for authority, home life, kinda reminds me of someone I once knew. However, something the Japanese seem to get is that everybody has a story. They inherently believe that everyone is born good, and if you become bad, it's because of circumstances and bad choices, and Yusuke never really had a chance. His mother, Atsuko, is a mess. Believe it or not, less so in the anime than in the manga. In the anime, she's just a drunk, but in the manga, it's obvious that there's more to her than that. And like Yusuke, she is spiritually aware, which may or may not have led to her alcoholism in the first place. Not everybody deals with things in a healthy way. She's also incredibly young, having given birth to Yusuke at only 14, something which is super rare in Japan, but actually knowing people with parents that young, I can firmly say that this alone can fuck you right up. She's single and Yusuke's father is completely out of the picture. We never even learn his name, but Atsuko loves her son more than anything. However, she can't get over her own personal demons to be a good mother, or even a present one, as she's usually too sauced or just straight up passed out to care for her son. So obviously Yusuke is a punk with a chip on his shoulder, and one of the most cliche things about punks is how cliche they are. Always. From the UK to Japan to America, we all have a similar story, but what thins the herd is heart. Believe me, I have met a lot of punks in my day. Some of them are dead, some of them are dying, some of them are in jail, and some of them have gone on to change the world for the better. And for all of Yusuke's flaws, the kid is cursed with being a genuinely good person. Hence why he's dead. Despite being annoyed by a little kid being stupid, Yusuke jumped in front of Truck-Kun to save him and died for it, sending the mortal and spiritual world into slight chaos. It's kind of hilarious, kind of sad, but literally everyone had written off Yusuke as totally fucked. But then he goes and sacrifices himself for some brat he doesn't even know or like, and totally gums up the works. Also, it's a great comedy moment. Turns out the kid would have been totally fine if Yusuke hadn't intervened. He actually got a little bit more banged up than he would have if Yusuke didn't do anything. Still, this one action proved that the person that you see on the outside, or perhaps the way that you perceive somebody, is entirely different than who they truly are in most cases. This setup is gold, and the beauty of shonen anime is that it almost always is trying to teach young boys a valuable lesson. Almost always. In this case, mangaka Yoshihiro Tagashi was speaking to young people about inner beauty. It's so easy to fall into the trappings of becoming what people think of you or letting your mistakes define you. However, if we truly are all born with good in us, that good just doesn't disappear. We can find it again. And sometimes the good in you may burst at the seams and you'll find yourself doing something you feel is out of your character or even stupid for the sake of others. So naturally, after being outed as a soft-hearted schmuck, Yusuke is immediately put to work by the powers that be to become a spirit detective in order to get his body back, setting him on the path towards becoming a world savior and the ridiculous ending of the series that we aren't going to get into in this video. He's also given a spirit egg that, when it hatches, will either become very helpful or devour Yusuke. Of course, this depends on his heart. And wouldn't you know it, this is the thing that hatches from it. I mean, the kid might knock your teeth out, but inside, he's just poo. And I love that so much, you know. I remember when I was a kid, I thought that there was this magical transformation to becoming an adult, but there isn't. You are the same person at 15, 29, 60, and when you die. Who you are at the core doesn't change, just your awareness of how your actions and words affect the world around you. We all have good and bad qualities, which we choose to highlight is just that, a choice. However, you can't change the poo within you. But it's funny, isn't it, that someone who comes off as prickly as Yusuke is actually as tender as he proves to be. That's someone who is so manly on the outside in his battles against evil spirits and the bigger threats like Toguro and the Dark Tournament could be so emotional and kind. Honestly, I don't really think so. I mean, look at a cactus, right? Scary on the outside, but the inside will keep you alive in the desert, assuming you don't eat the wrong cactus, or the right cactus, depending on what you're trying to get done. Anyway, my point is that this 30-year-old anime is trying to teach a lesson about masculinity that the world still hasn't fucking gotten yet. Yusuke has power, a lot of it. However, on the inside, he still gets scared, sad, he mourns loss, he celebrates victory, he gets conflicted at crossroads. Cross this with a muscle-bound knucklehead like Goku, and the two don't even begin to compare when it comes to realism. But that's the point, and honestly, it's why I'm so attracted to Yu Yu Hakusho in general. Dragon Ball is a fairy tale. Yu Yu Hakusho is more like a slice of life with a fantastic twist. It comes off like a power fantasy, but it's really just the story of Yusuke growing up and becoming a man. So we're left with the question, what is a man?
A miserable little pile of secrets!
Well, I would argue typically yes. The Dropkick Murphys say that we're the first ones to starve, the first ones to die, first ones in line for that pie in the sky. And then when the sky darkens and the prospect is war, who's given the gun and then pushed out the door? Expected to die for the land of our birth, that we never owned one lousy handful of earth. And historically, there's plenty of proof of that, and I think it makes a lot of men bitter. It's a strange thing to be told that you have all the money and power, but to feel so worthless or weak, so responsible, but yet ineffectual. You see, as a man, you generally have not necessarily an idol, but someone you're always compared to, someone who is quote unquote manlier than you. But usually that guy is a callous dick. I mean, you feel me? Or am I just talking too much from personal experience here? I feel like this is a common thing. Notice that Yusuke's teacher is actually a woman. Not only that, but she's this old ass lady too. Genkai is the embodiment of everything Yusuke is learning about himself and the world as he grows throughout the narrative. The woman is incredibly tough but kind and caring as well. She'll beat Yusuke into the ground until he gets it, but always picks him back up when he falls. Being a man isn't about being uncaring, unfeeling, ripped, seething with testosterone, and using your power to bend the world to your will. That's called being a fucking asshole. Being a man is about doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done because you understand people's feelings, their needs, and you wish for the well-being of others. Also, keynote here, that's kind of what being a woman is about too. Just look at Genkai. So where does the idea of man even really fit into reality? Everyone has feelings, and they're all the same feelings. What's different is the makeup we place on them and what we do with them. Why you're mad doesn't change the fact that you're mad, or that the anger you feel is the same as the anger someone else feels for a totally different reason. Mad is mad, my friends. Same with joy. Emotion is a universal language, just like music. Our feelings exist for us to relate to each other, not to drive us apart, and they certainly don't make us weak. If knowledge is power, wisdom must be the edge of that blade. And I think wisdom is the ability to relate to other people, to empathize empathize with them and their circumstances, but also to relinquish control. And for the record, I'm not trying to lecture. Instead, I want to open up a dialogue, because there is a difference between men and the man, and that line gets blurred so often. At this point, the two have become almost completely synonymous. And yes, there are men out there who want to become the man. And also, being raised wrong doesn't help. The thing you hear the most when comparing responses to conflict between men and women is that women are quicker to empathize and men are quicker to want to fix the situation. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the problem is that some situations can't be fixed. Sometimes the thing people need the most is empathy. But when you're told you're powerful and you realize you're powerless, it creates a mental dissonance, a feeling of futility and uselessness. And I guarantee every one of you can pull up a memory from this exact scenario, male or female, or anything in between. For instance, when Genkai is murdered, Yusuke is beside himself because at the time, he was completely incapable of preventing it, helpless to defend what he cared about, no matter how much power he had, no matter how strong he thought he was. Questioning what makes a man isn't your quote-unquote beta shit. It's what we should all be doing as we tumble endlessly into the future. As we face greater threats, it's going to take evolution to triumph over them. It's going to take men and women working together as equals, respecting each other as humans with a couple different organs selected in a genetic lottery to get through it as a species. We hold each other up or no one gets over the wall. Yusuke isn't my favorite just because the spirit gun is the coolest or because his attitude is hilarious. It's because as the main character of a shonen story, he is the embodiment of what I think we should be looking at when we gaze into the future. He's the kind of idol I think that young boys should have as long as they have someone to guide them with a little bit of context. It's okay to be rough and tough, but only when trapped. It's more important to recognize all aspects of who you are as a person and to embrace your gentleness. If we choose to exist within the constraints of society, our goal should be to make it better for everyone. Be proud of your feelings. It means you're alive. Use them to better yourself instead of locking them away. Use them to get closer to people rather than keeping them at an arm's distance. Shonen is about giving young people hope and teaching life lessons. This is what Yoshihiro Tagashi taught me through Yusuke Urameshi, and it was a very valuable lesson. Hey, how's it going, everybody? This is Mike. I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching the entire video. I know this episode was a little bit different, so let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Gotta send out some love to Super Saiyan God, Yamcha, and of course, our lucky patron of the week, DJ Blacklight. Thank you guys so much for your consistent support of the channel. We're working with Display, got our own line of merch coming out. Check us out on social media, like the video, subscribe if you're ready. If you're not, go watch the rest of our videos and figure out what you're missing. Thanks again for watching. This is Bonsai Pop. I'm Mike. I'll see you next week. Aesthetic, aesthetic, aesthetic. The first time I threw on City Hunter, I was immediately enveloped by late 80s neon vaporwave and city pop, and I just fell in love. Oddly enough, for being one of the more successful Shonen Jump comics, especially during its time, City Hunter never really got much love out west. And when I say west, I mean the US. In fact, this is not a show I grew up with in any way. I actually found out about it through the game Jump Force by Bandai when Ryu Saiba became one of my mains. Out of all the characters, he stood out with his normalcy, to be honest. Just a guy with a gun and some really goofy moves. I instantly wanted to know what his deal was and why he was hanging out with the likes of Yusuke, Urameshi, and Seiya, so I picked up the manga and ordered the anime in a box set because it wasn't streaming anywhere at the time. Thankfully, it's streaming on Crunchyroll now because I'm pretty sure this box set is a Chinese bootleg. It's terrible, but it was enough for me at the time. At least enough for me to realize that City Hunter was something I was deeply missing in my life. This is the story of Ryu Saiba, a sweeper in the neon 80s Tokyo bent on defending and also kind of preying on innocent women in need of protection. This is City Hunter. Let's get into it. Okay, so first off, while City Hunter might not be too widely known in the US, it is huge in Europe and Asia. Like, there's been a million adaptations, including one where Jackie Chan played Ryu Saiba, so yeah, this is a cherished and respected franchise almost universally. However, explaining it is a little difficult. It's a lot more pulpy than most anime, especially the ones we tend to cover, as there isn't a huge overarching story. Instead, City Hunter enjoys playing off of its protagonist Ryu, and as previously mentioned, he's what's known
known as a sweeper, basically a private detective out to rid Tokyo of crime, more or less on his own. For all intents and purposes, he is the anime James Bond, and by that, he's exactly what anime would do to a smooth pimp daddy like James Bond. Ryu is first and foremost a pervert, womanizer, very, very, very tropey, and if you can't get over this one ain't for you, because this man is incorrigible every single episode. A lot of people say that the show doesn't hold up because of this, and I can see why. Watching it now can bring out some hardcore cringe emotions, especially if you're very serious about, worrying about poisoning the minds of the youth. It can be hard to take things within its context sometimes, especially through a more modern, sophisticated lens. However, when you realize he's a Japanese spoof on Bond, it becomes a little bit more obvious what the mangaka Tsukasa Hojo was going for when he created his character. It's important to note that Ryu is never rewarded for being a playboy womanizer. In fact, he usually gets a 100-ton ecchi hammer to the dome for his attempts. Also, in the end, he always does the right thing. It's almost as if his perverse attempts are a way to make him seem far less dangerous than he actually is. Because believe me, this guy's dangerous.
Call Kenny Loggins, because you're in the danger zone. From Top Gun.
Like Ryu's City Hunter itself is extremely polarized. It's half humor, half detective action, and it hits on both sides of itself perfectly. When Ryu isn't trying to grab on some tickles, the man is an absolute badass, which again is hilarious when you consider he's always pulling up in a Mini. And yes, I mean a Mini, not a Mini Cooper. Ryu drives a Mini, which is an old British economy car produced by BMC, not BMW. A goofy dude with a goofy British car and a gun that was made in Connecticut. Yes, I'm talking about the Colt Python 357 Magnum. Boy, now I'm not a gun guy, guns scare me, blah, blah, blah.
Is banana a firearm?
But this baby makes my Johnny tingle. In particular, the more compact 4-inch barrel 6-shot 1955 original described by some enthusiasts as the finest production revolver ever made. It doesn't pack as much punch as a 44 Magnum, but it also isn't gonna break your wrist every time you fire it, so the weapon can unload faster. And man, is Ryu good with this gun. Almost inhumanly good. Same with driving. When he is in action mode, this guy is all business. We see a different side to him, almost as if he's a different person. It's very reminiscent of Vash's Stampede or Saitama. He has an extremely goofy exterior that often gives people the wrong impression of him, or I don't know, maybe the right impression. But when it's time to get to work, his entire demeanor changes. It's not as obvious as Saitama, where he's literally drawn differently to show the change, but it's 100% there. So what's it all about? Well, when the story begins, Ryu and his friend and business partner, ex-detective Hideyuki Makimura, are running City Hunter, which is an underground organization of two, which basically takes on any job that needs to be done off the books. Generally, it's a protection or investigation. They're alerted to their patrons by the letters XYZ being posted on the blackboard at Shinjuku Station. And at first, it all seems like fun and games. Ryu is either working or womanizing or multitasking, while Hideyuki plays the foil. However, Hideyuki is murdered by an assassin hired through the Red Pegasus drug organization. And with his dying breath, he asks Ryu to look after his sister Kaori, and this is really where the show takes off with an actual plot and lead female character. And unlike her stone-faced brother, Kaori is young and adds to the comedy of the show while she eventually learns the ropes of being a sweeper herself. Originally not aware of her brother's underground business, Kaori eventually susses out what's going on behind the scenes and joins the team despite being generally disgusted by Ryu and his antics. I mentioned earlier that Ryu generally gets a 100-ton ecchi hammer over his head. Well, said mallet is wielded by Kaori 100% of the time. Now, City Hunter is split into 4 parts aptly named City Hunter 1, 2, 3, and 91. 2 is generally touted as the peak of the show. Essentially, each episode boils down to new girl, new problem, groping guns, game over, with very few exceptions. However, I do recommend finding some kind of guide. Not all City Hunter episodes are created equal, and you certainly do not have to watch them all to enjoy the experience. Now, when you get to City Hunter 2, it's a little bit of a different story. This is also around the time when Ryu and Kaori's relationship really starts to blossom. However, we do eventually get a little bit more information on Ryu, which helps a lot in understanding his character. On vacation with his parents as a young kid, Ryu's plane went down in the middle of Central America. He was the only one who survived the crash, and after walking for days, he found himself in a village torn by civil war. In order to survive, he became the ultimate warrior. This is where he was trained and honed his skills as the ultimate marksman. The guy is basically an ex-commando super stud. When he finally makes his way back to Tokyo, becoming a sweeper was really all he could do with his morality and skill set. Also, if you haven't figured it out yet, he only takes on female clients, which could be seen as part of his womanizing, or maybe he just wants to protect women. I honestly don't know, because the show seriously takes things to the next level sometimes when it comes to the absurdity and the ecchi hammer, but after spending time with him, it's hard to see Ryo as a bad guy. And when he pulls out that big, thick python, he tends to make the ladies swoon regardless of how disgusted they had previously been with him, and I think it's because when he's in the heat of the moment, he lets down that lecherous facade. I mean, it also doesn't hurt that he whips out a sexy revolver and pulls off the one-hole shot, which is this special 3-round burst that hits the target in the exact same entry point each volley. I mean, that's pretty hot. Tyler would let him shoot 3 rounds in his hole. But what it comes down to is that my feelings on City Hunter are similar in a way to how I feel about G Gundam. Some things aren't about depth or the hidden message. It is okay to simply enjoy things for what they are because they make you feel good. The president-elect recently said that now is a time for healing, and I think that shonen anime is a really good way to heal. While pieces like Naruto and Yu Yu Hakusho will get you thinking, things like City Hunter and G Gundam will allow you to relax. You just sit back and enjoy the ride. We all need to give ourselves a break sometimes, I say as we're currently working on 3 separate videos, but really you have to let your brain rest and take in some serotonin or you're gonna lose it. As the great prophet Deltron 3000 said, upgrade your gray Maddox, one day it may matter. And City Hunter is a gorgeous blast from the past. It has this feeling of nostalgia buried in it that will envelop you and take you to a small warm place occupied by bright city pop tunes, neon signs, and jerry curls. The 80s was a time of relative peace and prosperity for both Japan and America, so entering that time period vicariously through some entertaining and thoroughly likable characters is nothing but joy. It would be easy to accuse me of pandering to nostalgia, but I think nostalgia is an important piece of who we are as people. Going back to a time when things seemed simpler is therapeutic as long as you don't get trapped there. And this doesn't mean that you can't feel nostalgic for or enjoy City Hunter if you didn't watch it when it first aired. Tyler had never seen it before and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a series that is definitely socially outdated, or at least now would be considered extremely edgy, but it still holds the beauty of the old 80s anime style with a loose plot that makes it easy to watch whenever you need a break. When it comes to City Hunter, that's one of the series' best attributes, is that you don't have to sit through 150 episodes to get the whole story if you don't want to. You can jump in, enjoy yourself, and jump out. And honestly, that's what I need right now after the year that we've all had. That's why we're covering so many fun anime without a huge amount of depth to go into, this show number specifically. Though then again, next week's video is going to be pretty intense. Regardless, I always think it's kind of funny to think about the concept of TV asking too much of us, but sometimes it does. And covering something like City Hunter lets me gush, gives me the good feels, shows you something awesome, and doesn't burn me out. Not every video can be a silent voice or a samurai shampoo. And honestly, I don't want every video to be like that because, you know, sometimes it's depressing. Sometimes you need to focus on the good stuff. I mean, heck, 2-3 weeks ago, I was stressed to the point that I wasn't eating right, wasn't sleeping right. I'm sure I wasn't alone in that boat. These videos that we put out are more about what we see in the moment based on what's happening in our lives and in the world and with you guys, and right now I think we need something fun and easy, like your mom. It's nice to have something that's more adult that you can just jump into and enjoy yourself from time to time. And I know that if I'm having a rough day, that at the end of it I can throw on some City Hunter and return to the glorious economic bubble of 80s Tokyo and watch a dude get the bad guy. It's not always necessary to take life so seriously. I say that because I hope you don't take this anime too seriously. It is first and foremost a comedy. And let's be honest, it's going on 34 years old right now. I don't think it's hurting anyone or poisoning the minds of our youth at this point. So chill out, keep calm, because now is the time to heal. So I recommend a heavy dose of City Hunter and maybe a friggin' nap. Take care of yourself, take it easy, peace.
Hey everybody, this is Mike. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. I just wanted to send a very special shout out to one of our Super Saiyan gods, Neonosis, for being a high tier supporter. Thank you so much. And our lucky patron of the week, Ahagao Lover 90. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you guys would like to support the channel, check us out on Patreon. Watch all our videos. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want. If you're not ready yet, take your time. Do you. And I'll see you next week. Fist of the North Star. If the title alone doesn't stir your heart, well, then I guess you're in the right place. Here on Bonsai Pop, I like to talk about old anime. It's kind of our bread and butter. However, it's not so often we get to expose people to or revel in something as monumental as Fist of the North Star, aka Hokuto no Ken. This is a series that not only defined a genre, but a decade of Eastern animation, sporting characters that are still used in modern media to this day. Not to mention it's the 18th most profitable franchise of all time, right under Barbie and right over Toy Story, but honestly, that doesn't mean shit, and we all know it. However, Fist and Kenshiro and everything to do with this experience is truly something special, but don't take my word for it in the intro. I'm Mike, and this is why you should still watch Fist of the North Star. Let's get into it. Hi everyone. Did you know that pledging $1 to our Patreon pays for roughly 330 views on our channel? That would be watching every single video we've ever made 5 times. That means a single dollar would likely cover more than your lifetime of views on our channel. And if you give it to the Patreon, you get so much more in return. Bonus content, access to our private community, updates, podcasts, so much for so little. And when I say our patrons are the best people, I mean it. In over a year, we have never had a single issue on our server, and the community is alive and thriving. This is a Patreon-driven channel, meaning we pick topics specifically for us and our patrons. We talk to them daily, we hang out and play games with them, we do streams for them, everything that isn't specifically our Saturday video that you get here on YouTube. If you want to get the Bonsai Pop full experience, please consider joining the best community on the web by helping to support this channel's existence. All Patreon money is split between Tyler and myself for food and rent, and without it, we couldn't make content like this full time. Anyway, thanks so much for your consideration, and on with the show. Now, when people of culture think of post-apocalyptic anime, generally the first thing that comes to mind is Fist of the North Star and Kenshiro. Now, it wasn't the first series to take on this setting. That's arguably Violence Jack in the early 70s, another story we'll get into another time. However, Fist was the first to explode the way that it did. Heavily inspired by Violence Jack, Mad Max, and Bruce Lee, Hokuto no Ken is set in a world after a nuclear war wiped out civilization. The remnants of humanity fight for what food, water, and shelter is left in a never-ending wasteland filled with bandits and mutants. And honestly, that's pretty typical for the genre now, but when the original manga ran in 1983, much of this was uncharted territory. This was well before media giants like The Walking Dead crushed the worst enemy of humanity is humanity itself trope into the dirt. But what makes Fist stand out amongst the rest is inarguably its main boy Kenshiro and his fist, which is indeed of the North Star. You see, this isn't Fallout or The Road or The Walking Dead. Nah, this is that Japanese, which means it's wacky as fuck. Ken is master of Hokuto Shinken, literally meaning Big Dipper God Fist, which is a deadly martial art focused on the exploitation of people's 708 Kiraku Hiko, basically pressure points. But not in the cute Last Airbender way like Ty Lee does, nah. See, Hokuto Shinken is an art of assassination designed to disrupt the user's enemy from within to completely destroy them, resulting in something far more satisfying than a simple dead arm. Exhibit A. Now, if you think that's shocking now, imagine what it was like for the Jerry curl Neanderthals who occupied the pre-internet 80s. This was something never seen before. This level of brutality and violence and pure badassery was cutting edge, exhilarating, and exactly my kind of jam. And while again, there were anime and manga in existence at this point which had reached and even surpassed this level of gratuitous people punishing, Fist of the North Star had something else going for it. Weekly Shonen Jump. And while its predecessors, Devilman and Violence Jack, were debuted in Weekly Shonen, Shonen Jump's preceding competitor, by the early 80s, Shonen Jump had firmly taken the top spot on the manga magazine charts. Compared to Weekly Shonen, Jump had a wider appeal, it had more female readers, and sported the best up-and-coming manga. Weekly Shonen had ceded the #1 spot to Jump in the early 70s, so neither Devilman nor Violence Jack had the same kind of reach as Fist of the North Star. This was also Jump's absolute heyday. In 1983, Dr. Slump and Cat's Eye were well into their series. Dragon Ball was right around the corner, quickly joined by City Hunter, Saint Seiya, and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which are easily some of, if not the biggest names in manga history, which were all sharing the same magazine at the same time. However, rising above all of these in sheer brutality was Fist of the North Star, which popularized and coined its own class addendum of hyperviolence. Now, we happen to be a channel that listens to its audience, and we acknowledge that not everybody is into classic anime, and maybe some of you are new to the medium as a whole, and I get that. And at least in America, where classics are concerned, it generally takes a refined palate to get into things like Casablanca or Ninotchka or The Grapes of Wrath, or even classic cartoons like Hanna-Barbera, Heckle and Jekyll, Thundercats, or the original Transformers. However, anime has a much better shelf life than something like The Gummy Bears, for instance. The show, not the candy, those things will last forever. Animation in Japan was always taken seriously and never aimed at only kids. In America, The Simpsons was arguably the first major animated show to break into the adult hemisphere, but Japan had been making groundbreaking animation with complex stories for decades before that. Corners weren't cut the same way in anime as it was in American cartoons because anime wasn't considered just for stupid kids who won't notice or just to sell toys. And all of this leads to shows like Fist of the North Star still holding up next to modern shonen greats like My Hero, and in my eyes, far surpassing them due to the raw nature of the time period. In the 80s, everything was hand-drawn, giving productions this timeless feel, but more so than that, anime at the time was still, in a way, discovering itself. This was a time before the major tropes we see throughout almost all anime that comes down the pipe now, a time when there was no road to follow, only to be paved, and trailblazing one of those roads was undeniably Fist of the North Star. You know when the creator of something as intense as Berserk cites you as its main influence, you're doing something right. And right out of the gate, Hokuto no Ken dumps you into this wilderness without a really good clue of what's going on, and it pulls no punches, literally or figuratively. Kenshiro is immediately set up as an almost untouchable badass. I mean, besides having his main rival poke some pretty symbolic holes in his chest, well, main rival for the first part of this is a pretty long series. Anyway, Ken is initially on a revenge mission to reclaim his kidnapped fiancée Yuria, and in turn meets his young sidekicks Bat and Lin, whose main job is just watching him be a badass. However, it's the world in which this badassery takes place which makes all the difference. The wasteland is gross and grimy and filled with this sense of hopelessness as it's overrun by thugs and raiders with giant purple mohawks and no shits to give about who they're going to turn inside out next. In this unimaginable landscape, Ken is the one beacon of hope, quiet and determined and generally unstoppable. He wanders after his fiancée, helping where he can, which usually entails leaving bloody pools of refuse in its wake. Battle is truly where Kenshiro comes alive. His general low-key demeanor is instantly juxtaposed by his insane Bruce Lee battle cries and his deadly Hokuto Shinken. And every once in a while, if we're good, you get one of the most iconic catchphrases ever uttered by anyone ever. You're already dead. Right before the dumbfounded Mohawk man he poked 100 times explodes in a mass of blood and gore. And like, I'm sorry, but that is the coolest shit I've ever seen. More importantly, that's something that can only truly be realized through animation, and this anime was where it was happening. And personally, I find telling somebody to check something out so they know their history never works unless that person is really into that. It's not a good sell because history isn't always fun. See Bridge Over River Kwai. History isn't what makes something great. Popularity isn't what makes something great. Being the 18th highest selling franchise of all time isn't what makes something great. What makes something great is intrinsic to its existence. It's a quality that can't simply be described, but instead needs to be witnessed. Part of what makes Fist so endearing and enduring is that you can enjoy it any way you'd like. Personally, I just throw on a random episode when I go to bed and let it play. I know no matter where I start, it's going to be awesome. It's a show with consistency. No matter what is happening in the overall story, you know that Ken is going to be kicking ass. But more importantly, he'll be fighting for the good of the world as an ethereal force of nature left over after the end of the world. I always found it enthralling that despite this being a dystopian future, a post post-nuclear apocalypse sci-fi setting, it's a man and his fists that carve their way through the corruption. There is 100% a mysticism to Hokuto Shinken, which adds an Eastern fantasy element to this world, which is one of anime's greatest calling cards. Despite this being a setting that could arguably be anywhere, Fist is undeniably Japanese, and with that basis, the story is also undeniably Japanese. The idea of balance is extremely important in most Eastern philosophy, so naturally a world in chaos like the one of Fist of the North Star would eventually need to correct itself into a state of balance. And what we see is a wasteland controlled by those with the most power lording over the weak. However, it's ironically a single man slowly making his way through it that turns this anarchistic hellhole into a more livable place for the average person. Ken is stoic and determined. In a way, he's the epitome of what a post-nuclear Fallout warrior monk would be. He's the check to the powers in this world, and it's never-endingly fun to watch him come out on top, especially in a shower of guts and gore and brains and cartilage. Lin and Bat serve as his foils and add levity to the over-the-top violence and desperation of the world. And while the story isn't necessarily a happy one, I've always found a feeling of triumph in the end after making my way through it. And sometimes it just feels really good to watch some bad guys explode. The anime ran from 1984 to 1988 in 2 series, Fist of the North Star and the appropriately named Fist of the North Star 2, eventually capping out at 152 episodes. There's also a few movies, most notably Fist of the North Star, which was released in 1986. And I suppose the question would be where to start. And if I had to pick one, I would say probably that movie that I just mentioned. It'll give you the right idea of what you're going to get with everything else. But if I was to give my honest opinion, I don't think it really matters. This is one of those rare series that can be enjoyed on multiple levels. You can watch it for the spectacle or the art or the nostalgia, or you can go in order for the story, which will give you all of the above, but take significantly more time. But most importantly, Bonsai Pop wouldn't exist without Fist of the North Star. And when I look back on some of my favorite videos that we've made, Wicked City, Berserk, Ninja Scroll, Dorohedoro, Akira, none of these would have existed without the influence of Hokuto no Ken, which again holds up just as well as it would if it was made today. It's something that can and should be appreciated on many levels, not just as a historical series, but as a series that gave way for a generation of hyper-violent and boundary-breaking anime. And honestly, that's my favorite thing about anime, is how it continues to bend people's minds and go beyond what we would imagine into universes that seem to truly envelop you the deeper you get into them. And if anime is something that takes things to the next level, if it's something that breaks the boundary, if anime is punk rock cartoons, then Fist of the North Star is undeniably anime, and I don't think that the medium would be the same without it. So that is why I think that you should still watch Fist of the North Star. But if you're already a fan of the series, why don't you leave a comment letting people know why you think that people should still watch Fist of the North Star? I guarantee that you got opinions. Anyway, I'd like to take this time to just let you know that you, listening right now, are one of the very special few that actually make it to the end of a video, and that's an important thing. That means that not only did you enjoy it, but you're still watching. That's pretty cool. You would be really surprised how few people actually watch an entire YouTube video. So because of that, because you're here, I just want to say one more time to think about possibly joining our Patreon, like these 2 excellent individuals here. Our patron of the week, Paladin Patterson. My dude, thank you so much for being a part of the Patreon. And hopefully you're watching so you get to see your shout out as patron of the week. And second, of course, we always got to shout out one of our Super Saiyan gods, which is currently our highest tier. And this week, our raffle winner was Meg Rez right now. What's up? Thank you so much for being one of our Super Saiyan gods. The gods are the backbone of the channel. You guys are the ones that give so that we can give. And it is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. Y'all are the best. Anyway, make sure to stay tuned. If you like this video and you're new here, definitely check out some of our other videos. I'm sure that we've covered more of your favorites. And if you enjoy those, maybe consider subscribing. As always, make sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at bonsai_pop and at twitch.tv, where I stream. That is /bonsai_pop there as well. I've been doing a Dark Souls 1 remastered playthrough, and it's been a lot of fun. We've had a very good time with that. Anyway, that's it for this one. My name is Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Vash the Stampede is a complex character. At the beginning of Trigun, we know nothing about him, his past, or the planet Gunsmoke. We're dropped into a complete mystery, a lonely tundra of heat with nothing but small towns reminiscent of an era long gone. Folk around these parts seem to be brought right out of the Wild West, yet there's plenty of futuristic tech to let us know that we're not in Kansas anymore. The currency is in double dollars. The towns are named after Gregorian calendar months. Guns abound. Whiskey pours like rain, and the sheriff and mayor keep the peace. These are the future people of Earth, people from a time beyond our own, but they've regressed to an earlier social state on a planet not their own. While the setting is taken in instantaneously, our main character Vash takes much longer to fully unravel, so much so that we don't actually get his whole story until over halfway through the series. In the beginning, all we know of Vash is that he's a goofy, lanky guy in a red trench coat that can't say no to donuts. Basically, Ryan, if he had any style to speak of, but by the end we feel something. Is it camaraderie, empathy, understanding? Whatever it is, it's visceral. It hits you deep, makes you care, it creates a lasting and intimate connection between you and your vessel into the world of Trigun. At least it did for me. Vash's life story hit me in more than just a I can see myself in his shoes kind of way. A well-written character allows you to put yourself in their shoes, to feel the path that they walk, but an exceptional character takes time to understand. They build an ongoing and ever-changing relationship with the audience throughout the show. They don't simply allow you to see yourself in their shoes, but instead they blur the line between their shoes and your own. It feels like they relate to you more than you relate to them. Vash was one of the first characters to ever give me that feeling. A chilling spine tingle that went beyond understanding and settled deeply in a brotherly bond. Trigun is one of my favorite classical animes, and it all starts with this one man in his iconic red trench coat. Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike here. If you haven't seen Trigun yet, your life is incomplete, so you should probably go do that. It's one of those shows that really stands the test of time, and it's a space western, so gotta love that. Basically, anything that gives me Han Solo vibes except for the Han Solo movie itself, I'm gonna be into. However, regardless of your personal taste, Trigun and its focal point, Vash the Stampede, speaks to its audience on a universal level. It's something that can truly be enjoyed by anyone, and it still looks good for its age. Anyway, before I gush my guts out, let's roll that intro. The first scene of Trigun opens on a saloon in the middle of nowhere. Two men playing cards around a nearby table discuss the $60 billion double dollar bounty on Vash the Stampede's head. They speak of his past horrific transgressions, and as the two men gossip, a man cloaked in a bright red coat sips a drink at the corner until bounty hunters blow the entire saloon sky high. Bullets unbiasedly tear apart everything inside, and as the smoke clears, the metal saloon sign that fell from its perch is pushed over, revealing Vash the Stampede completely unscathed. Silently, Vash stands up, points his massive pistol at the group of bounty hunters, and the scene ends. We're steeped in this feeling of danger and uncertainty. Vash is a monster, a destroyer of towns, a killer. He has no prejudice whether he kills man, woman, or child. Someone so evil and dangerous, the government bounty on him is beyond comprehension. No words are given from this spiky-haired man of death. He looks and feels impressive, untouchable, and dangerous right from this opening scene. His image would remain that way if not for Meryl and Millie, two Bernadelli Insurance Society employees. Meryl specifically is Vash's foil. It's through her questions and desire for a better understanding of Vash that we begin to learn more about him. After the girl's introduction, we return to Vash, who completely 180s into a goof. He's drawing pictures with bullets and crawling around like a cockroach to avoid enemy fire. The best way I've seen Vash described is crouching moron, hidden badass. His antics are hilarious, but he knows his way around a gun. After a quick battle, Vash reveals a deep weakness.
Actually, I can't stand blood. Just the very sight of it makes me feel a little faint.
This is backed up by his consistent need to say he's a hunter of love and peace. The first episode is a masterpiece in writing and direction, engaging from the start but leaving many questions to be answered in the future. It also gives a glimpse into Vash's paradoxical nature. He's funny, kind-hearted, and can't stand violence, yet he's being hunted for destroying entire towns and is likely the best gunslinger on the planet. This doesn't add up. How could someone like Vash destroy an entire town? Someone who can't even handle a little blood. He has two sides to himself. He has two faces, two types of expressions, similar to One Punch Man's Saitama, a serious one and a goofy one. They're completely distinct from the other, shifting the tone of each scene with ease. Trigun continually puts Vash in increasingly dangerous and life-threatening situations. However, he perseveres unimpeded by every obstacle in front of him while never sacrificing the lives of others, including those who are trying to kill him for his bounty or otherwise. His moral code, to never sacrifice life, is the rope he's bound by. He's willing to go to great lengths to not break that code. Vash gets hurt, blood spills from his figure, scars and injuries uncounted are revealed whenever he removes his shirt, quite literally exposing himself, and each one marked upon him is a token reminder that the decision to never kill comes with a price. Hell, he's even missing an entire hand that's been replaced by an intricately concealed machine gun. These past injuries were obtained while working to, ironically, not kill his attackers. It would seem that Vash has a hero complex, a need to help others even if they don't ask for it, and he does so without ending a single life. He's kind of like Space Cowboy Batman with a voice that doesn't sound like his balls are so big that they're dragging on the floor.
It's an amazing coincidence.
And this respect for life, or fear of taking it, becomes his most prominent character trait. However, we aren't given the motives for this masochism until over halfway through the series. Episode 17 is that turning point. It is by far the most revealing episode in the series, and it completely throws Vash's traumatic past into the limelight, as well as his brother Knives. In Rem Savarem, we learn everything we need to understand about what makes Vash tick. Vash and Knives are kids on a spaceship, part of the Seed Project. Earth had become uninhabitable due to human greed, our natural desire for destruction, and this ship was a last-ditch effort to save humankind. The people of Earth had sealed themselves in freezer tubes while a small crew manned the ships in an attempt to find a new habitable planet. Vash and Knives spend most of their days with the crew, specifically a young woman named Rem, who plays with them and teaches them. At one point, the brothers and Rem are watching a butterfly struggling to escape a spider's web. Vash is being careful to release the captive gently when Knives suddenly crushes the spider in his bare hands, explaining,
"That was the easiest way to stop him."
However, Vash is appalled. He didn't want to kill either of the creatures. He wanted to save them both. Now, to Knives, saving the butterfly is essentially the same as killing the spider. You can't logically save both. Helping all butterflies means the death of all spiders. Rem interjects, asserting her role as the mother figure, and she wisely explains to Knives that it's not right to make the choice so easily. The butterfly and the spider are both living creatures, predator and prey, both have a right to life. Knives is unfazed. To him, saving both will always be a naive contradiction. In anger for his lack of empathy, Vash attacks his brother. The two aren't able to comprehend each other's thinking, which is step one in creating an enemy and starting a war. This idea of whether or not we can choose who lives and dies is pushed to an ultimatum during a latter event on the ship. A deranged crewman has Knives at gunpoint and is accusing the boy of being responsible for the death of the person the crewman just shot. Rem comes between the two, staking her life on her next words. No one has the right to take the life of another. You don't want to kill him. Yet the onlooking captain opens the airlock and sucks out the gunman to save Rem. This situation highlights both Vash and Knives' thinking. Vash taking after Rem, Knives more in line with the captain. Unfortunately, the captain's actions stood as proof that killing can protect, and this is a lesson an angry young man took to heart. Knives sabotages the ship in an attempt to crash it into the planet they're orbiting. In one action, dooming all of mankind yet again while simultaneously letting Vash and himself live. It's a cold and calculated move. Emotion has no part in his plan. Logically, humans would act like a virus on this planet just like they did on Earth and end up destroying it and each other once again. But the brothers would be safe because they aren't humans. The two are in fact hyper-intelligent interdimensional plants used as a source of power and energy. It's a little trippy, but they are basically living tools for humanity. Their original purpose was to power whatever planet the ships would land on. However, Vash and Knives are sentient as well as independent, whereas most of the other plants obviously aren't. It's why they can live outside of special light bulb reminiscent containers that are typically required for plants to survive. Ironic how the two mirror our relationship
relationship with plants. So many heal and so many hurt, but all are necessary for life to continue in our habitat. In an attempt to resolve Knives' actions, Rem corrects the course of the failing ships, allowing their downward thrusters to extend and saving the humans frozen aboard. However, this comes at the cost of her life, breathing color into her final unspoken philosophy: your life is the only life you may choose to sacrifice because it is yours. Rem's incineration was the igniting spark for eternal flames of philosophical war between Vash and Knives. The agony etched on Vash's body reflects that of his mind. Losing his mother figure because of his brother's actions was bad enough, but the trials that came after were also excruciating, particularly the destruction of July City, an event which happened 100 years after the ship landed on Gunsmoke. One does not simply receive a $60 billion double dollar bounty on his head for nothing. The destruction happens during a flashback. Vash still isn't in control of the intense power that his gun is able to unleash from his body. In a showdown with Knives, he unintentionally wiped out the entire town, ending not just one life, but many. Precious lives, irreplaceable lives. The man, ravished by the anguish of his own actions, is who we find in a red trench coat in a dusty saloon in episode 1. His uncontrollable outburst, in complete conflict with his morals and his entire existence, is bound to atoning for his sin. Vowing on Rem's memory to never kill anyone ever again, his catchphrase cry of love and peace tainted by his past. His traumatic experiences of his youth mixed with his destruction of July are the motives which fuel him forward. However, it can't last. Unfortunately, Trigun is not about solving issues with non-violence. It's touched upon thematically, but the introduction of Knives' minion Legato ensures that we know what the real message is. Legato is a villain hired by Knives to make Vash's life a living hell. He's a sadistic nihilist who is determined to destroy humanity, including himself. Now, for the record, his character has a far greater emotional range and is even sympathetic in the manga, but we're going to stick to the anime's adaptation of him for the show. So Legato and the lesser villains under his command, known as the Gung-Ho Guns, are intent on putting Vash in life or death situations in order to force him to kill in self-preservation. Their entire purpose is to push Vash to break his moral code or, kill him, whatever works. That's what Knives wants, to completely break Vash, to bury that last light of sympathy. Vash is able to consistently get out of the pair's schemes without killing until Legato finally confronts him face to face. In episode 24, ominously titled Sin, Vash is finally backed into the ultimate corner, one where Millie and Meryl's death are assured unless he ends Legato's life. At this point, Meryl's feelings for Vash are extremely clear, expounding upon the severity of the situation. Legato wants Vash to break his moral code. He wants the stain of never-ending pain on Vash's mind. And with no other option and the words of his friends and mother figure running through his mind, Vash breaks that code and shoots Legato in order to save Meryl and Millie's lives. He stands there afterwards with tears in his eyes, and the moment is so true. It's the moment when we realize that ideals are nothing more than hopes. In the end, it's all just smoke and mirrors. Vash's journey is one of sorrow and excruciating philosophical paradoxes. He's haunted by a horrific childhood and past weakness, mistakes which defined the rest of his life. Because of the destruction of July, misfortune follows him everywhere. His bounty is a constant reminder of the things he's done wrong. He can't stay in a single place for too long, or people will find out who he is, resulting in them either running away screaming or trying to kill him for the bounty. However, it's not surprising that he also has a goofy nature. People trying to escape their own reality often do. He's running from his past and attempting to live a normal life without confronting the issues that plague him. Vash continually seeks two simple things: love and peace, and yet those are the two things he cannot obtain. Not while his dark history lingers in his head and on his reputation. His moral code is a reminder of his motherhood figure Rem, but in a very real way, Knives was always right. You can't always save everyone. And that's what Vash finally had to come to terms with in Sin. His story feels tangible because of the emotional pull over hope, desire, and reality. We all wish for the best, believe that things will work out, and we've all been crushed by reality reminding us that we are fools. So many of us have made transgressions in our lives that seem to continually follow us wherever we go. Lost figures of safety learn that you can't make everyone happy. It's the same thing as saying you can't save everyone, and that's the final weight placed on Vash. The sins of our past, if unconfronted, continue to pile up until we break. Vash breaks after killing Legato. The arc of Trigun is a story we all experience within ourselves. It's not always about life and death, but the themes remain the same. You can't make everyone happy all the time. The longer you run from your past, the worse things will get. We all have to break our moral code at some point in life if we wish to survive. Sometimes you need to relinquish control for the sake of others you hold dear. We're too hard on ourselves for the blunders we regret or the things we can't change. But we can learn from Vash because he's able to pick himself up and realize that mistakes are a part of life. That is what the series finale is. Vash fixing his first tragic mistake to atone for all his others. Confronting his past, owning up to what happened, and ensuring that it can't happen again by taking care of Knives. He doesn't kill his brother, but he makes sure that Knives can't continue destroying humanity. In that way, he can atone for what happened earlier in his life. Vash realizes that while it's important to have a moral code, you also have to make your own choices to protect that which you hold dear. Hence the symbolism in the dropping of his red trench coat, reminiscent of the color of Rem's favorite flower. Vash is finally moving on, shedding the crutch of his maternal longing and realizing his full potential as an individual, allowing himself to be as human as a plant monster could possibly be, and letting his mistakes guide him to a higher, more meaningful life instead of cowering at the immensity of what he'd done. That is the final motif of Trigun. Grow from your mistakes. The guilt means you care, but your path to redemption will never unfold if you stew in self-hatred. Learn from it, don't stagnate within it. Understand that the ideals you hold are simply a guiding light. Sometimes they have to bend, sometimes they have to break, because nothing is ever black and white, and there's simply nothing more human than that.
If you guys haven't seen Trigun yet, believe me, we have not ruined it for you. I still know the plot, and I go back and watch it from time to time. And with that being said, it is time to spread some love to our ultimate lucky patron of the week, Elizabeth Malky. Liz is awesome. She always takes part in our viewing parties. We really appreciate it. It's always better when she's there. Thank you, Liz, so much. Congratulations on your win. And if you would like to be our lucky patron of the week, get entered into that contest, join our private Discord, or just get some extra content for your downtime, all it costs is $1, just $1. If you guys like this video and you haven't yet, I definitely recommend checking out our response to Giguk and Mother's Basement on classic anime. It is one of my favorites. And while you're at it, why don't you go check out last week's video we did on Dragon Ball. It's a very special one. We're super proud of it, so we hope that you go and watch it. It's also our first collab on the channel, so it's a little bit of a historical point there as well. Don't forget to follow us on social media at bonsai_pop, Instagram and Twitter for news updates, awesome pictures, the dankest memes, you know the drill. Anyway, we will be back next week with a brand new story you never knew, one that I am personally very excited for. My name is Mike, thank you for watching Bonsai Pop, and we will see you next week.
It's hard to walk on water when you're stranded on a desert planet, but that does not stop Trigun from having its own Jesus, Vash H. Stampede Christ, carrier of sins, and immortal angel that follows a path of righteousness, love, and peace. That's right, we're going biblical, but don't worry, this isn't preachy. I am all for melting down the Vatican and using it to feed the poor. It just so happens that Trigun, believe it or not, was written by a devout Catholic. In Vash's wake lies death and destruction, but, you know, Jesus disrupted the peace too, didn't he? He was condemned to death for partaking of the power and authority of God himself and also calling himself King of the Jews. The Jews did not like that. And so he atoned for humanity's sins all at once by dying on the cross. God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. John 3:17, that's right, I quoted the Bible. Vash's entire personality, backstory, and character development are based around this same idea that he must save humanity from itself, bear our cumulative sins, and atone for them. When it comes to anime, I cannot think of another character that is so directly a metaphor for Jesus H. Christ himself. Mostly because I try not to consume Christian media, except that time that I really liked Under Oath. Their Only Chasing Safety is a really good album, okay? But if you dig into the blatant Christian overtones of the show, I mean, there's a fucking cross-shaped rocket launcher filled with mercy, for fuck's sake, alright? It becomes apparent that Trigun's story is on par with the likes of Angel's Egg in terms of religion religious allegory. Trigun is well known as one of the big 3 sci-fi western anime that came out in 1998, but it's fair to say that Trigun is definitely the black sheep of the 3, and I think part of that is because its themes are uncomfortably hard-hitting. The show takes the idea of morality, specifically killing, and not only asks the audience if it's sometimes necessary and unavoidable, but if it's morally acceptable in the eyes of capital G, God. Then it throws Vash through a gauntlet of traumatic experiences and forces him to make the choice of who should die. Trigun is a test of your morality when faced with an unfair situation. When the 5th commandment is, thou shalt not kill, are you still redeemable in the eyes of God when you kill to save somebody else? Is that a rule break or a bend? How do you know when you've atoned for your sins? Or is there ever really true salvation from our mistakes? Trigun is the story of 3 men, broken in different ways, metaphors for different aspects of religion and their combined journey to salvation. This is Trigun. Let's get into it. Just so you know, I wrote this video with the intention that you've already seen Trigun. If you haven't seen Trigun, why do you hate yourself? Anyway, this video isn't going to explain a ton of the plot. I'm assuming you know it, so let's just get right into it. Vash the Stampede is an angel who views himself as a demon, and when you break down his character to the bare essentials, he's a good person who can only see the bad in himself and unneededly thrusts the weight of every unfortunate event on his own shoulders. No matter how many people he saves, no matter how the situation arose, if people died, he burdens himself with the guilt of their losses. This self-hatred, regret, and need to atone at every possible moment stems from 2 catalysts: the July incident and his brother Knives. Knives is the entire reason the planet Gunsmoke is inhabited by humans in the first place. He sabotaged the siege ships with the intention of killing every human on board so that Knives and Vash could create a paradise on the planet without human involvement. It's only due to the selfless sacrifice of Rem Savrem, Vash's early life mentor and caretaker, that the siege ships corrected their flight path and the humans aboard survived. The single dying act is continually brought up in Vash's mind, and I believe it's the foundation for Vash's need to constantly throw himself in harm's way for the sake of others. Rem's words, "No one has the right to take the life of another." This is why he would rather bring himself to the brink of death instead of killing those who look to cause pain to innocent civilians, and this philosophy of pacifism is cemented by the July incident, a reunion of Vash and Knives over 100 years after they initially landed on Gunsmoke, where Vash's angel's arm activates for the first time, destroying the entire town. Now, there was no one in the town at the time. Vash didn't directly kill people, but the number of citizens who lost their homes and died in the desert via hydration, starvation, or heat stroke is unknown. So Vash's consciousness is heavy with an unknown number of losses that he believes are completely his fault, despite Knives having been the one that made the incident occur. So in an effort to atone for his sins, he travels around the planet trying to help and save people, and he does. He's not perfect. People get hurt, towns get destroyed, innocents die, far less than if Vash hadn't been there. But because all these horrific events are happening around him, Vash gets blamed for the majority of them. Again, in an allegory for Jesus, Vash unfairly places the weight of these sins on himself and forces himself through an unending process of atonement for the actions of others. So we have an immortal man from a virgin birth who bears the sins of an entire planet and is on an endless quest to atone for humanity's sins without any other option for salvation available in his mind. He's essentially taken on an unfinishable quest, a role that he will always come up short on. Therefore, he can never forgive himself and allow his own sins to be washed away. The lengths at which he's willing to take these ideas in the anime are arguably self-abuse. Yet, he believes that this sacrifice is worth it, that humanity is worth his inability to ever achieve salvation, and perhaps that he doesn't deserve to be happy, that he's done too much wrong to find peace. Now, the flip side to Vash is Knives, an immortal being just like Vash, yet there's obvious differences in morality to say the least. First off, Knives detests humanity and sees this as nothing more than a parasite and mistake. He wants to rid Gunsmoke of humans entirely, and in doing so, create a paradise for just him and Vash, the quote-unquote superior beings, which is kind of interesting. Maybe that's a little bit of a back to Adam and Eve kind of thing. Anyway, to achieve his goal, Knives assembled a team of assassins named the Gung Ho Guns, and their entire purpose is to break Vash mentally by forcing him into a situation where he must kill or be killed. Eventually, they switched this tactic, realizing that Vash doesn't have much care for self-preservation, and instead begin killing innocents to force Vash into killing one of the Gung Ho Guns in order to stop them. This escalates with Vash having to to choose between killing Legato to save Meryl and Millie, or letting them die to retain his ideals. And in a moment of massive pain, he breaks his pacifist code, making the right choice, but causing an immense amount of psychological trauma and pain in the process. He had defined his persona on pacifism. Breaking it literally breaks Vash's character and takes him a lot of time and support to recover from that choice. The entire point of making Vash choose who dies is to force him to confront the fact that pacifism doesn't always work. Up until that point, he'd always found another way around, a way without killing. Legato's death is when reality sets in. Even Jesus can't save everyone, and that's why people go to hell. Speaking of the bad place, Knives represents Satan in the show. He harbors the ideas of temptation, abuse of power, lack of empathy for those weaker than you, and destruction. Of course, this is biblical Satan, not the church Satan. Satan, different thing. There's a massive amount of symbolism to back up this idea of Knives playing the devil, right? For example, Satan is considered a fallen angel, a son of God who fell from grace. Yet he still holds power over hell and a host of demons. Knives is another immortal who controls the gung-ho guns, all of whom have magical or special unexplained powers, and one of those powers is even called the Demon's Eye. It's the perfect metaphor for Satan and his army. Knives also has the Angel's Arm ability, but unlike Vash's white and blue accented angel arm, his is black and red to symbolize that corruption and fall from purity. The color of an angel's wings is often used in media to show their heavenly standing. For instance, the show Lucifer makes good use of this, having Lucifer's wings as black and devil-like at first, only to become white and angelic over time as he begins to see himself as good rather than evil. We see the same thing as Knives' angel arm is decked out with black angel wings, whereas Vash's are much more angelic in nature. But I think the most prominent comparison to Christianity's devil is the parallels of temptation. The devil is supposed to cloud your judgment and tempt you onto the wrong path. He's supposed to make you want to sin, making it difficult to know what's right versus wrong. And we see this exact struggle in Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Now, Wolfwood is literally a priest, just not a good one, which makes him very realistic. It's really more of just a cover-up for the fact that he's secretly working for Knives, yet he does seem to care about his faith, or lack thereof. As the show carries on, he continually butts heads with Vash on his pacifist ideals, calling them naive. And this escalates to a point where Wolfwood kills a kid who was a gung-ho gun, despite Vash trying to find an alternative solution. Vash yells at him, distraught by his quick trigger finger, but Wolfwood argues that if he hadn't done what he did, Vash would be dead in the dirt. Wolfwood believes in the idea that you cannot save all the people all the time. He's pragmatic in his decisions, which is a complete foil to Vash's idealism. He learned to take action first to survive from a young age when he killed his own asshole of a guardian that was abusing him. But somewhat ironically, considering Vash is literally labeled a walking natural disaster, Vash plays the role of Jesus and brings Wolfwood back from the devil's grip to rekindle his faith. You see, before venturing with Vash, Wolfwood saw himself as unsavable. His list of crimes is too long, his sins are too harsh, but then he watched this man, hated by an entire planet, hunted by demons, and psychologically crushed by the weight of others' actions, continue to put the needs of everyone over himself and find pacifist solutions to unwinnable problems. It's something we see again and again with the people who get close to Vash. Despite the turmoil in his soul, his ideals are infectious. His success makes people want to believe that killing isn't ever the answer, and eventually brings Wolfwood back into the light, into grace, if you will. Wolfwood is symbolic of all of humanity having an angel and a devil on their shoulder, Vash and Knives. He's caught between two immortal beings, one representing sainthood and idealism, and the other temptation and pragmatism. And we know that there are ways we can be better than we are, right? Yet it isn't always practical in the real world. Speaking out about things that are important may be the right thing to do, but YouTube could also flick you in your left testicle. So should we take the higher road even if it doesn't always work out? Or do we ensure we survive, albeit by immoral methods? This is the struggle Wolfwood weighs throughout the show and always chooses to survive first. But in his final battle, instead of killing his former mentor, Wolfwood lowers his gun, a gesture showing that he's finally come to terms with Vash's idea of faith, because here's the thing, we don't know where a choice will take us until we make it. How can you possibly know if a person will decide not to shoot you if you shoot them first? Vash lives his life with hope for each and every person. He hopes they'll make the right choices and has faith that they will, and he's willing to put his life on the line each and every time to support that faith. Wolfwood has spent his entire life expecting the worst from people, so he never gave anyone the choice to shoot or not. That is the primary difference between the two gunslingers. One has faith in humanity, the other simply doesn't. But Wolfwood lowers his gun and gives his mentor a chance to kill him. He puts his faith in Chapel, which is his mentor's name is Chapel. I know, it's a little on the nose, and is rewarded for believing in humanity for the first time in his life. As a metaphorical icing on the cake, Wolfwood takes Chapel's apple and takes a bite. In the Old Testament, obviously an apple symbolizes the fall of man, but in the New Testament, the apple is an emblem of redemption from that fall. This scene is showing Wolfwood achieving his redemption, regaining his faith, and fully embracing the goodness that Vash offers. In a sense, Vash literally converts Wolfwood to a new faith. I keep telling you, the dude is the most Jesus dude to ever anime as a dude. However, Legato uses mind control and forces Chapel's body to shoot Wolfwood, and Wolfwood finds Vash distraught over not saving someone yet again and tells him he needs to forgive himself. We are not perfect. We all make mistakes. Allow yourself to be forgiven. He's giving the advice that speaks to what he's about to do for himself. Those are the last words he gives Vash and leaves a trail of blood in his wake. The next scene is Wolfwood opening the doors to a church and beginning his first and last confession. The scene is lit with radiant light, casting Wolfwood's shadow as a man hunched over from carrying the burden of the cross for so long. He confesses his sins of killing countless people, always to protect the children of his orphanage or for the better good, not realizing there was ever another way, Vash's way. He says that his sins are too heavy to ever atone for, yet today, he feels at peace. This is a man of contradictions, and those paradoxes weigh so heavily on him, he's unsure if he can ever be forgiven for who he is and what he's done. He's a priest and a gunslinger, an orphanage owner and a killer, a hero and a villain all at once, and yet, for the first time in his life, he asks for forgiveness, which is a big deal for churchy people. Unfortunately, he then goes on to say that he doesn't want to die because there's so much left to accomplish. But in the manga, he dies content and at peace knowing that he saved others, even if he had to sacrifice himself to do it. I find this to be more in line with the theming of the show, but even in the anime, knowing that he finally understands and wants to continue seeing this world in a new light, it's heartbreaking. It's understanding what's important to you after it's too late. And honestly, this part hits you in the gut every single time. No matter which ending you prefer, Wolfwood died protecting Vash's ideals and died with more peace in his soul than he ever had before. In the final episode, his voice reaches Vash at a critical moment, saving him and helping Vash beat knives, and you can kind of look at this as confirmation that Wolfwood was forgiven and achieved the salvation that he wanted and is now watching over Vash from above. Trigun is truly the allegory of the devil and God rage inside me, and that entire contest is boiled down to these three characters, but it's quite unusual to see this much Christian symbolism in anime. In general, Christianity isn't typically a main talking point for anime. It's generally overshadowed by Buddhism and Shintoism, but Yasuhiro Naitao, the creator of Trigun, is considered one of the very few successful Christian mangaka. When I was researching for this video, what I learned was a bit more complex than devout Catholic makes good manga. Naitao grew up Buddhist. He studied and eventually converted to Christianity while retaining those Buddhist principles. Yet, if you try to find any mention of him actually talking about being a devout Catholic, you'll come up empty. In fact, in an interview back in 2009, he was asked about Trigun's moral themes and whether they are based on his religious views. And he and his translator replied, "Naitao doesn't follow a religion. Quote, maybe I'm just a great person." While this is kind of a quirky response, like, okay, dude, I'm sure you do a lot of mitzvahs, it also reflects how Naitao feels about religion. You can have faith and not be religious. Faith doesn't need to conform to a belief system. Trigun is obviously created with spiritual and religious symbolism in mind, but the real message that the symbolism is driving towards isn't about God or Satan or prayer or anything truly religious at all. The entire point of Trigun is to reinstill your faith in humanity. And honestly, Twitter selling out to Elon Musk, that's a big hit for me, okay? Faith is it's pretty low right now. But Trigun is trying to show that believing the worst in others is a darker path that will lead you astray from helping make the world that most of us want. Trigun is a show about a harsh planet filled with villains and hardship, but little in terms of support or protection. The story isn't about Vash finding himself and stopping knives. In fact, that's a very small section of the show overall. The majority of Trigun is about learning that it's okay to put your faith in other people, that making mistakes is a part of life, that people who make mistakes deserve second chances. We don't live in the Wild West anymore. I mean, we are in the West and it is wild, but the problems in Trigun aren't anywhere close to the issues that we deal with every day. But the messaging still rings true. Grow from your mistakes, for we are all mortals and we all have the capacity to know the eventuality of wrongdoing. But wrongdoing does not make you evil. Continuing to do wrong after realizing your mistakes separates the good from the bad. This is the meaning I found behind Vash and Wolfwood's relationship. It's never too late to find your faith, to learn from your mistakes and not let them hold you back. And if you take the time to grow, maybe you'll find some inner peace too. Signed, an atheist and a Jew. Hey everybody, thanks so much for making it to the end of this little video on Trigun. If you like this video, I definitely recommend checking out a couple more, and if you like those videos, why not subscribe? As always, at the end, I like to thank one of our high-tier patrons. This week, it is going to be Luthi the Zombie Biker, and our lucky patron of the week, Broom3. If you've been enjoying our content lately, and you're enjoying our pace that we're putting out content, please think about joining the Patreon. It really does help. Otherwise, follow us on various social media for updates and whatnot. Google us, do your thing. As always, I'm Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.